The air in the courtroom felt heavy, thick with tension. A sense of anticipation buzzed through the room, palpable and almost electric. It was a scene that none of the spectators, reporters, or even the seasoned legal experts had expected to witness that day. In the midst of the chatter, the rustling of papers, and the click of cameras, a moment of utter silence descended. Elon Musk, CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, sat at the defendant's table, his eyes focused straight ahead. He was used to being in the public eye, accustomed to the relentless spotlight of being a billionaire tech mogul. But today was different. Today, he was not on stage at a product launch or sitting in a boardroom full of innovators. Today, he was in a courtroom, facing accusations that could potentially destroy his reputation, and worse, his empire. The case had started months ago with a relatively routine business dispute. A rival tech mogul, someone with deep ties in the industry and his own controversial history, had filed a lawsuit against Musk. At first, the legal community had brushed it off as just another case between two rich men fighting over intellectual property and market share. But that was before the trial had begun. Today, the stakes were higher than anyone could have imagined. As Musk's legal team worked behind him, poring over documents, he felt the familiar pressure mount. He was calm, almost too calm, but beneath the surface, his mind raced. What could possibly go wrong today? Then, the judge entered the room. Her name was Judge Ellen Ramirez, a figure well known in the legal world for her no-nonsense attitude. She had a reputation for being fair but firm, and for never letting her emotions influence her decisions. Yet, something about her gaze today felt different. Her eyes were sharp, focused, as if she had been preparing for this moment for far longer than anyone knew. The courtroom stood as she took her seat. The air seemed to get even thicker, like the calm before a storm. And in that moment it was clear, this trial would not follow the typical script. "Mr. Musk," Judge Ramirez said, her voice cutting through the silence. "You stand accused of ethical misconduct, negligence, and a series of breaches that have impacted not just your company, but the entire tech industry. How do you plead?" The question was straightforward, but it felt like a punch to the gut. Musk took a deep breath, his face remaining unreadable. "Not guilty," he replied, his voice firm, unwavering. A murmur spread through the courtroom. Musk had prepared for this. He knew the charges, he knew the story the opposition would tell. But this wasn't going to be just another corporate lawsuit. Something felt off. The judge's eyes remained locked on him as she leaned forward, fingers tapping on the desk in front of her. "You know, Mr. Musk, I've been following your career for years," she continued. "And I must say, I'm not impressed by the persona you've built for yourself. I find it rather convenient that you've managed to turn every setback into an opportunity. But now, here we are. And this time, there's no escaping the consequences of your actions." Musk's lips pressed into a thin line. He had faced his fair share of critics, but this was different. The judge wasn't just speaking as a neutral party, she was personalizing the case, turning it into a judgment of his character. It was as though every success he'd achieved, every tweet he'd posted, and every decision he'd made was now under intense scrutiny. "Ms. Ramirez," Musk said, standing up, his voice steady but his eyes narrowing. "I am here to defend myself. I don't know what your intentions are, but I will not allow personal biases to interfere with the truth." The judge raised an eyebrow but didn't respond. Instead, she turned her attention to the prosecution, signaling that it was time for them to present their case. The prosecution wasted no time. A sharp-dressed attorney, a woman in her late 30s with dark, determined eyes, stood and approached the podium. "Your Honor, esteemed members of the jury, we are here today because Mr. Musk's actions have caused far-reaching damage to individuals, companies, and even entire industries," she began. "While he may try to paint himself as a genius entrepreneur, the reality is much darker. He's been involved in a series of unethical practices, from misleading investors to disregarding regulations that affect not only his companies but the public at large. Her words hung in the air, every accusation landing like a blow. The jury listened intently, taking notes, and the courtroom's atmosphere grew even heavier. The prosecution began to lay out the details of their case, showing evidence of Musk's alleged misconduct. For every piece of evidence, the prosecution had a compelling argument that pointed to Musk's guilt. But Musk wasn't about to back down. His defense team rose to their feet, ready to respond. One of Musk's attorneys, a tall, calm man named Robert Williams, approached the jury with an air of confidence. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice smooth, "this case isn't about what the prosecution wants you to believe. This is about the truth. Mr. Musk is a visionary, someone who has built companies that have reshaped the world. What we're dealing with here is a dispute over business practices that, when viewed through the lens of personal vendettas, have been twisted into something much larger than they truly are." He paused, letting the words sink in. "What you're seeing today is a spectacle. A circus designed to tear down a man who has done more for innovation and technology than most could dream of. This isn't justice. This is a witch hunt." The tension in the room shifted, but the judge remained stoic, her expression unreadable. It was clear that she wasn't swayed by either side just yet. As the hours passed, the arguments continued to build, each side taking turns to present their case. But there was something in the air, something that no one could quite put their finger on, that made everyone in the room realize this wasn't going to be just another legal battle. This was something much bigger. The stakes were higher. The emotions were real. And the outcome was uncertain. As the session neared its end, Judge Ramirez stood, her gavel poised in her hand. "We will reconvene tomorrow. Mr. Musk, I expect you to be ready to defend your actions in full. And I suggest you take a long, hard look at yourself before you do so. This is your chance to face the consequences of a lifetime of decisions." The courtroom emptied in a quiet, stunned procession. No one spoke as they filed out. The atmosphere was thick with the weight of what had just transpired. The trial was far from over, but one thing was clear, this wouldn't be an easy fight for anyone involved. Musk left the courtroom, his mind racing. Tomorrow would bring more drama, more revelations, and more challenges. But what he didn't know yet was that the real battle wasn't in the courtroom. It was just beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The courtroom buzzed with anticipation as the next day's session began. People filed in, quietly taking their seats, the murmurs of conversation dying down as Judge Ramirez entered. Today would be a critical day, the opening salvo of what promised to be an intense battle of wits, egos, and, ultimately, reputations. Musk sat at the defendant's table, his face a mask of calm, but his mind was elsewhere. It was hard to shake the feeling of the previous day's unexpected confrontation with Judge Ramirez. Her words, sharp, direct, personal, had pierced through his usual armor of confidence. She had been tough, even for someone like him. This wasn't just about winning a lawsuit or silencing a rival, it was about something far deeper. She was challenging his very identity. "Mr. Musk, I expect you to provide your account of the events today," Judge Ramirez said, her voice cutting through the tension in the room. She glanced at the prosecution, who stood ready to present their next move. "Please proceed." The prosecutor, Rachel Carson, a seasoned litigator with a reputation for cutting through even the most well-constructed defenses, stepped forward. Her presence was commanding, her calm demeanor belying the sharpness of her mind. Today, she was prepared to lay the foundation for what they hoped would be a crushing case. "The case we are presenting, Your Honor, begins years ago, long before this courtroom drama began," Rachel started, her voice steady as she addressed the judge and the jury. "It involves a pattern of questionable behavior, corporate missteps, and outright ethical lapses on the part of Mr. Musk. While the world may admire his brilliance and ambition, we are here to reveal the truth behind the curtain. The room fell silent as Rachel began to detail Musk's business dealings, weaving a narrative of what appeared to be calculated risks that often bordered on unethical. She introduced evidence of Musk's personal life, connecting it to key business decisions that, according to the prosecution, put his companies and the public at risk. Rachel paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. The issues at hand, Your Honor, aren't just about market value or corporate strategy. They're about integrity, about whether Mr. Musk, despite his public persona, has taken actions that have harmed both his employees and consumers. The first few moments of the trial felt like a blur for Musk. The accusations, while not entirely unfamiliar, stung more in this context. The courtroom, packed with reporters, legal analysts, and onlookers, was not just an arena for a simple legal dispute, it had become a stage for something more sinister. It was a public spectacle, and Musk's reputation, built over decades of innovation, now hung in the balance. Rachel continued, presenting a timeline of Musk's various corporate controversies, each more damning than the last. There were the tweets, infamous messages Musk had posted in the past that had led to stock market volatility. The reports of labor unrest within Tesla, claims of unsafe working conditions that had reached the public eye. And then, there was the infamous, production hell episode, Tesla's struggle to meet demand for their electric cars, which had become a symbol of Musk's sometimes reckless ambition. But it wasn't just Musk's companies under scrutiny, it was Musk himself. Rachel painted a picture of a man who had let his ego and ambition cloud his judgment, repeatedly bending the rules for personal gain. The accusations felt like a hammer striking the anvil of Musk's carefully crafted persona. As the lawyer spoke, the words seemed to grow louder in his mind, echoing with the weight of each accusation. A pattern of reckless decisions. Ethical lapses. Exploiting workers and consumers alike. He felt a flicker of frustration, this wasn't the story he had worked so hard to build. But he couldn't let it show. He wouldn't. Once Rachel finished presenting the prosecution's opening argument, the room shifted again, and Musk's defense team stood. Robert Williams, Musk's lead attorney, was a seasoned trial lawyer, known for his ability to turn even the most damning evidence in a case into a win for his clients. He adjusted his tie, then looked up, his gaze scanning the courtroom as he began. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you've just heard is a distortion of Mr. Musk's character, his work, and his vision, Robert began, his voice confident and clear. Mr. Musk has never been afraid to take risks. He's never been afraid to challenge the status quo. But what's being presented here is not the story of a man who has made bold decisions, it's a story of someone trying to discredit the very innovations that have changed the world. Robert's words were not just a defense of his client, they were a defense of innovation itself. Musk's companies, he argued, had done more for the environment, technology, and the economy than most could dream of. The accusations, he said, were based on isolated incidents that didn't capture the larger picture. As for the labor issues, Robert continued, Tesla and SpaceX are companies that lead the world in creating clean energy solutions and revolutionizing space travel. Yes, they've faced challenges. But we would ask you to consider whether these accusations are truly about ethics, or whether they're simply about attacking a man who has dared to dream bigger than most. His defense was strong, and it certainly struck a chord with Musk's supporters in the courtroom. But Musk knew that this wouldn't be easy. The prosecution had already proven they had a strategy that could dismantle his reputation piece by piece. They were not here just for a legal victory, they were here to publicly humiliate him. But Musk wasn't without his own weapon. His mind raced as Robert spoke. He knew there were elements of truth in what Rachel had presented. But they were only half-truths. The full picture had yet to be told. The judge leaned forward, her expression unreadable as she gave the floor to the prosecution for their rebuttal. We'll see how Mr. Musk responds when the truth is revealed in its entirety, Rachel said, her voice filled with a quiet confidence. She knew that the case had only just begun, and it would get worse before it got better for Musk. The tension in the room was palpable. As the arguments continued to build, Musk's mind flashed back to his early days, those sleepless nights in the garage, the sacrifices he'd made, and the people who had believed in his vision. He thought of his family, his friends, and his companies. He thought of the legacy he wanted to leave. He couldn't let this be the end of the story. But with each passing moment, Musk began to realize that this wasn't just a courtroom battle, it was a battle for his future, for his vision, and for everything he had worked so hard to create. The days bled into one another as the trial progressed. Each session was like another brick added to the wall of tension that loomed over Elon Musk. The courtroom became his battlefield, where every word spoken seemed to twist his fate further, like a slow and steady tightening of a noose around his reputation. Each day, the prosecution's case against him grew stronger. The evidence they presented seemed meticulously planned, calculated to chip away at Musk's credibility. Rachel Carson's team had dug deep, exposing every flaw, every misstep from his company's history. They brought in former employees who spoke of long hours, unsafe working conditions, and even claims of harassment within Musk's companies, stories that painted a stark contrast to the image of a visionary entrepreneur. But it wasn't just Tesla or SpaceX under fire. Musk's personal life was also thrust into the spotlight. His controversial tweets, his public feuds, and his sometimes erratic behavior had become part of the prosecution's narrative. They argued that these actions, often seen as impulsive or rebellious, revealed a pattern of reckless disregard for the consequences. It was a carefully crafted campaign to tarnish not only his business practices but also his personal brand. At the same time, Musk's defense team was working around the clock to rebut these claims. Robert Williams had become more than just Musk's attorney, he had become the mastermind behind a complex strategy to protect his client's legacy. They countered the prosecution's narrative by painting Musk as a misunderstood genius, someone who had taken risks to push humanity forward, to make the world a better place. But it wasn't enough to simply defend his actions. Musk knew he had to do more than just deny the allegations. He had to prove that his intentions had always been rooted in something bigger than himself. In the face of mounting accusations, his team was starting to craft a narrative that would explain his behavior, though they all knew it would take something extraordinary to turn the tide. That's when the real conflict began to surface. Musk was in his office late one night, reviewing documents for the next day's session, when his phone rang. It was an unknown number, but he answered it without hesitation. The voice on the other end was calm, yet somehow laced with tension. "Elon, it's David," the voice said. David, an old friend from his early days at PayPal, and someone who had always been in his corner. "I don't know how to say this, but the media, they've dug up something. Something personal. And it's big. It's going to hit tomorrow." Musk's stomach dropped. David continued, "I don't know if you can stop it, but you need to know. It's a direct attack on your family." Musk closed his eyes, trying to steady his breathing. There had always been rumors, whispers in the media about his personal life, about his relationships, his divorces, and his children. But the one thing Musk had always kept close to his heart was his family. He never let anyone see the cracks, never let the world know the personal cost of his ambition. "I'll deal with it," Musk said, his voice tight. "Thanks for letting me know." As he hung up, a sense of dread settled over him. His world was already unraveling, piece by piece, and now, the one thing he had worked hardest to protect, the privacy of his family, was under attack. The next morning, the media onslaught began. A major tabloid released an explosive story, one that detailed a series of personal revelations about Musk's family life. It painted a picture of dysfunction, claims of strained relationships with his children, private disputes with his ex-wives, and allegations of neglect. It seemed to fuel the narrative of the prosecution, that Musk's success had come at the expense of his personal relationships, that he was a man who had sacrificed everything, including his family, in the pursuit of power and wealth. As the story spread, social media erupted with reactions, some supporting Musk and others condemning him. The press had been relentless, and the more they dug, the more they seemed to uncover. It was like watching a tidal wave of negative publicity crash against him. Musk sat in his office, staring at the screen, feeling the weight of the situation sink in. Every headline, every tweet, every comment seemed to add more weight to his shoulders. It was a brutal reminder of how far-reaching his mistakes had become. His vision had changed the world, but at what cost? That night, his legal team gathered for an emergency meeting. Robert Williams stood at the front of the room, looking more serious than Musk had ever seen him. "This isn't just about business anymore," Robert said, pacing in front of the group. "It's about survival. The personal attacks on Musk's family are now the central point of the prosecution's argument. We can't let them control the narrative." Musk listened in silence, his thoughts racing. He had expected the trial to get ugly, but he hadn't anticipated this kind of low blow. This was personal. The stakes had just gotten much higher. "What do you suggest?" Musk finally asked, his voice hoarse. "We need to take control of the story," Robert replied. "If we don't address the media storm head-on, it will completely derail our case. You need to show the jury that you're more than just the headlines. That your family, despite everything, is the foundation of who you are. We need to humanize you, Elon. You've always been seen as this untouchable tech mogul. It's time to show the world that you're more than just the persona they've created for you." Musk thought for a moment. Robert's words were harsh but true. He had been living in a bubble of innovation and progress for so long that he had forgotten how the world viewed him, how the press twisted every aspect of his life into something sensational. "I'll do it," Musk said, his voice steady. "I'll tell them my side. I'll take the hit. It's time to let the world know who I really am." The decision to open up about his personal life was not one Musk made lightly. But in the heat of the moment, he realized that he had no choice. The trial was no longer just about business, it was about his entire identity. If he wanted to preserve his future, he needed to change the narrative. The next day, he took to social media, releasing a statement that he knew would be controversial. In it, he spoke candidly about the difficulties in his personal life, acknowledging the strains and challenges his family had faced over the years. He didn't offer excuses or attempt to sugarcoat anything. Instead, he took ownership of his mistakes, admitting that he hadn't always been the husband or father he wanted to be, but that he was working to be better. It wasn't a perfect statement, but it was raw. It was real. And, perhaps for the first time, it showed a side of Elon Musk that no one had seen before. The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Musk's social media post had caused a ripple effect, turning the tide in his favor, at least among some of his supporters. But it was far from enough. The courtroom drama raged on, with both sides digging in deeper, unwilling to yield an inch. Musk felt the weight of it all in the pit of his stomach as he entered the courthouse on the 5th day of the trial. He had shared his vulnerabilities with the world, something he wasn't used to doing. It had been the right move, but it didn't erase the months of tension, the whispers behind his back, or the personal costs of exposing the cracks in his carefully curated image. As the jury took their seats, Musk noticed a shift in the room. The mood was different, charged with a sense of something monumental about to unfold. The prosecution had something new, a surprise witness who was set to testify. The courtroom fell silent as Rachel Carson rose to announce the new development. "Your Honor, we have a surprise witness who will testify to Mr. Musk's direct involvement in some of the more troubling allegations against him. We believe this testimony will shed new light on the defendant's actions." Musk's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment everything could change. "Proceed," Judge Ramirez said, her tone unwavering. The door to the courtroom opened, and a man stepped forward. His appearance was disheveled, a far cry from the sharp-dressed professionals who normally graced the courtroom. His hands were trembling, and he looked like he hadn't slept in days. Musk immediately recognized him, Robert Pierce, a former engineer at SpaceX who had left the company under less than ideal circumstances. Musk's mind flashed back to that time. Pierce had been a talented engineer, but his departure had been messy. There had been disagreements over projects, and Pierce had left with a bitter taste in his mouth. Now, Musk realized, that bitterness had turned into something far more dangerous. Pierce took the stand, his eyes scanning the room before he locked his gaze on Musk. The tension in the air was palpable. "Mr. Pierce, please state your relationship to the defendant," Rachel Carson said, her voice steady but carrying the weight of anticipation. "I was a senior engineer at SpaceX," Pierce said, his voice shaky but firm. "I worked directly under Elon Musk on several projects. And I'm here to tell you that what's been presented as bold visionaries is, in fact, reckless decision-making that endangered the lives of people." The word struck Musk like a hammer. Pierce was playing his hand, and it was going to hurt. "Mr. Pierce, could you elaborate?" Rachel pressed. Pierce swallowed hard before continuing. "There were multiple instances where Elon Musk made decisions that put people at risk. Safety protocols were ignored, corners were cut, and there were times when employees were pressured to meet deadlines no matter the cost. I witnessed this firsthand. The whole company, at times, operated with a culture of fear, where any dissent was punished." Musk's chest tightened as the words hit him like daggers. He had known the pressures of working in a startup environment. Hell, he'd created that pressure. But he'd always believed in the greater good, in the vision of space exploration and sustainable energy. Was he wrong? Had his ambition blinded him to the human cost? The prosecutor continued to press Pierce, drawing out more testimony about specific incidents at SpaceX, incidents that sounded eerily familiar. Rockets that failed due to lack of maintenance, pressure on engineers to fudge reports, and employees who felt too afraid to speak out against Musk's relentless drive to succeed. But Musk was no stranger to controversy, and he wasn't about to let this man control the narrative. He sat silently in his seat, the weight of the testimony sinking in, but in the back of his mind, he was already formulating his counterattack. Once Pierce finished, the defense team was given a chance to cross-examine. Robert Williams stood up, his face serious, but his eyes focused as he walked toward the witness stand. "Mr. Pierce," Robert began, his voice calm but laced with authority, "you've just described a number of incidents. But you failed to mention something critical: you were never involved in the decision-making process for those projects. You were a lower-level engineer. And I believe you left SpaceX not because of any ethical concerns, but because you weren't able to meet the standards we expect of our engineers." Pierce's face reddened, but he didn't immediately respond. He was caught in a lie, but the damage had already been done. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Robert continued, his voice gaining momentum. "You claim there was a culture of fear, but SpaceX is a company that has sent humans to space. It is a company that created reusable rockets, a first in the history of space exploration. Those feats were achieved because of a collective effort, not through unethical shortcuts. Now, Mr. Pierce, if your allegations were true, why did you not bring them up at the time? Why did you wait until now, when the world is watching?" Pierce floundered under the questioning. I didn't feel I could," he stammered. "I was afraid of losing my job." The defense team didn't let him off easy, and soon it became clear that Pierce's testimony was crumbling. His credibility had been shattered. Musk's legal team had turned the tide, showing that Pierce had a personal vendetta and that his claims, though damning, were far from airtight. As Pierce left the stand, Musk allowed himself a brief moment of relief. This was a win, a small one, but a win nonetheless. However, the emotional toll of the trial had already begun to weigh on him. He was no longer just fighting for his companies. He was fighting for his legacy, for his very sense of self. Musk realized that this wasn't just about proving he was right, it was about showing that the world had misunderstood him, that his vision was worth the sacrifices. That night, as Musk sat alone in his office, looking at the endless stream of news updates and trial reports, he finally allowed himself to reflect. He had spent years chasing progress, dreaming of a future that was bigger than any one person. But now, in the midst of this trial, he saw something different, a mirror that reflected not just his triumphs, but his flaws. He realized that perhaps the hardest part wasn't facing his enemies in court, it was facing the parts of himself that he had always tried to bury. Musk had always been the one in control, the one who made decisions for others, but now he had to decide how much of his soul he was willing to lay bare for the world to see. It was the beginning of a journey that Musk hadn't anticipated, one where the future of his companies, his legacy, and his own self-understanding were at stake. And no matter how the trial played out, Musk knew there was no going back. The courtroom had become a battleground, and every day felt like a grueling test of endurance. For Musk, it was no longer just about defending himself in the eyes of the law, it was about confronting the person he had become, the leader he had forged himself to be, and the sacrifices that had come with his drive for progress. The prosecution's case continued to unfold like a series of calculated blows. Rachel Carson's team had been relentless, and now, they were about to make their most significant move. It was the 7th day of the trial when the courtroom erupted with the arrival of the final witness for the prosecution, a former SpaceX employee named Anna Lee, who had worked closely with Musk on several of his more ambitious projects. She was poised, calm, and spoke with a clarity that made her testimony all the more dangerous. She wasn't just any employee, she had worked with Musk at the highest levels and had witnessed the demands he placed on his teams. As she took the stand, Musk's heart raced. Anna had been a brilliant engineer, one of the stars of SpaceX, but she had also been one of the first to leave the company when the pressure had become unbearable. Her departure, once a quiet affair, now threatened to be the anchor for the prosecution's case. Ms. Lee, Rachel began, you've worked under Mr. Musk's leadership at SpaceX for several years. Can you tell us about the culture at the company? Was it truly one of innovation and safety, as Mr. Musk has claimed, or was it a place where profit and ambition were prioritized above all else? Anna paused for a moment, collecting her thoughts. When she spoke, her voice was measured but carried an air of undeniable authority. Mr. Musk pushed us to the edge. We were told to reach the stars, to go beyond what we thought was possible, she said, her eyes briefly flickering toward Musk. But in doing so, we were asked to cut corners, to work with inadequate safety measures, to overlook certain flaws in designs, all in the name of progress. Musk felt the walls closing in around him. His mind raced back to the early days of SpaceX, when he had struggled to make ends meet, when failure seemed inevitable, and when every successful launch was a win. He had demanded the impossible of his teams because he believed in the impossible. But had he gone too far? Ms. Lee, Rachel continued, her voice calm, were there specific incidents where you witnessed these demands, where Mr. Musk directly ordered or encouraged risky behavior? Anna's eyes locked onto Musk as she recalled a pivotal moment in SpaceX's history. There was a launch, Anna began slowly. One that was supposed to be the breakthrough for the company. The Falcon rocket was going to be the first of its kind. The team was under immense pressure to meet the timeline. But there were issues, serious issues with the engine design. I spoke up about it, but Musk told us to keep moving forward. He said, we can't afford to wait. We need to succeed. We're too close. The air in the courtroom was thick with tension as Anna continued. That launch failed. The rocket exploded on the launch pad. It was a disaster, not just for the company, but for all of us. We knew the risks, but we were told to ignore them. The silence in the room was deafening. Musk's chest tightened as he listened. He had always known that failure was a possibility. But hearing Anna speak of that moment, the failure that had nearly ended everything, hit him harder than he expected. The guilt was overwhelming. But then, something changed within him. It wasn't just the guilt, it was the realization of what he had accomplished despite all the failures. He had built SpaceX from the ground up, and each failure, each sacrifice, had been a stepping stone toward a greater goal. Maybe it hadn't always been the cleanest path, but it was his path. And no matter what anyone said, he had to stand by it. As Anna finished her testimony, Musk found himself standing up, his heart racing in his chest. He had to respond. He couldn't let this moment define him. "I'd like to make a statement," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Judge Ramirez looked at him curiously. "Mr. Musk, this is highly irregular." "I know," Musk replied. "But I have to do this." With a nod from the judge, Musk stepped forward, his eyes scanning the courtroom. The room was silent as he took a deep breath and began to speak. "I've spent my entire life building these companies, creating something that I believe will change the world," Musk said, his voice unwavering. "I've asked my teams to take risks because, in this business, without risk, there is no reward. But let me be clear, I never asked anyone to put their lives at risk. I never encouraged anyone to ignore safety. I made mistakes. I've pushed too hard, and I've demanded more than I should have. But everything I've done has been for one reason, to create a future where humanity can thrive. We're trying to change the world, not just with rockets and cars, but with energy solutions, with sustainable futures. And yes, that vision has cost me. It has cost me friendships, it has cost me relationships, and it has cost me my peace. But I would rather lose everything than live in a world where we don't try to make a difference." Musk's eyes swept across the courtroom, and for the first time in the trial, he felt a sense of clarity. This wasn't about defending himself against a single allegation, it was about explaining who he was, why he did what he did, and why he couldn't back down. His voice softened. "I'm not perfect. I never have been. But I am driven by something bigger than myself. I believe in the impossible. And if that makes me reckless in your eyes, so be it. But I'm willing to face the consequences because, at the end of the day, I believe that the future we're building is worth every sacrifice." The room was silent for a moment. Musk's words hung in the air like a heavy weight, and even Rachel Carson seemed momentarily taken aback by the rawness of his declaration. The jury, too, seemed to be processing his words, their faces unreadable. Musk stepped back, his heart pounding, but he felt something inside him shift. He had laid his truth bare for the world to see. He could only hope it would be enough. As he returned to his seat, he noticed a change. The tension that had suffocated the room seemed to lift, if only slightly. The emotional weight of his words had created a crack in the prosecution's case, one that might just give Musk the opening he needed to win. For the first time in the trial, Musk felt the glimmer of hope. The road ahead was still uncertain, but he had no choice but to keep pushing forward. The days following Musk's emotional outburst in the courtroom were tense but strangely quiet. His bold declaration had taken the courtroom by storm, and for the first time in weeks, the media shifted their focus from the intricacies of the case to the raw emotions Musk had displayed. The world seemed to have paused for a moment, watching intently as the trial unfolded. Musk, however, felt a heavy weight still hanging over him. No matter how much he had exposed his soul, he knew that the outcome of the trial was still uncertain. The next day, the defense team was ready to present their closing arguments. The prosecution had completed their case, and now it was Musk's turn to make his final stand. He had done everything he could to explain his vision, his drive, and his struggles. He had laid bare his flaws and mistakes, but also his successes and his relentless determination to change the world. Whether it would be enough to sway the jury was anyone's guess. As the court reconvened, Musk sat with his team, feeling an unusual calmness in the air. His thoughts wandered back to the beginning of this journey, when the pressure of the case had seemed insurmountable. It was hard to believe that just a few weeks ago, he had been fighting for his reputation, for his companies, and for his very identity. But now, the emotional toll had transformed him. It wasn't about winning anymore, it was about understanding the costs of ambition and the sacrifices that came with it. In this trial, Musk had been forced to confront not only his business practices but also his own humanity. Rachel Carson rose to give the prosecution's closing statement, and Musk knew this would be a crucial moment. She spoke with the same calm authority that had defined her approach throughout the trial, presenting her case with a sharp and clinical precision. She painted Musk as a visionary, yes, but one who had crossed a line, a man who had endangered his employees and put profits above the well-being of those who worked for him. The defendant's actions, she began, were not the actions of a man simply driven by ambition, they were the actions of a man who was willing to compromise safety, integrity, and human life for the sake of his own vision. These actions cannot be ignored. The cost of this reckless ambition was too high. As she finished, she turned toward the jury. The evidence is clear. The defendant must be held accountable. Musk's breath caught in his throat, but he didn't let himself be consumed by the weight of Carson's words. This was his moment, and he had to take it. When it was his turn, he stood slowly, taking a deep breath. He looked around the courtroom at the jury, at the judge, and then at the public gallery, where a small crowd of his supporters and detractors had gathered. His voice was steady as he addressed the room. Over the course of this trial, I've shared my vision with you. I've shared my mistakes, my triumphs, and the challenges we've faced in building the companies that have shaped the future. I've admitted that my ambition has sometimes led me down a path that hurt others, and for that, I am truly sorry. He paused, letting his words sink in. But I also believe that what we've done, what we've built, is something worth fighting for. SpaceX has made history. Tesla has revolutionized the electric vehicle industry. And none of it would have been possible without the hard work, the dedication, and yes, the risk-taking of the people who have believed in the mission. We have all taken risks together to create something that has never existed before. And that has been my life's work. Musk's voice softened, his eyes scanning the faces in the room. I understand the gravity of the decisions I've made, and I understand that there are consequences to those decisions. But I ask you, all of you, if you had the chance to build something that could change the world, something that could make life better for millions, would you hesitate because of the risk? Or would you go all in, even knowing the potential cost? He took another breath, his next words coming with a quiet intensity. I don't regret trying. I don't regret pushing beyond what was comfortable. I don't regret any of it. And while I accept responsibility for my actions, I also stand by them. Because in the end, it is the bold and the brave who change the world. Musk returned to his seat, his heart pounding. The courtroom was silent, every eye on him. There was nothing more he could say. The rest was in the hands of the jury. The final deliberations began immediately after closing statements, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Hours passed, with the jury deliberating in private, weighing the evidence, and considering Musk's words. Outside the courtroom, a small crowd had gathered, watching for any signs of the trial's outcome. Musk's legal team waited anxiously, as did the media, knowing that whatever the decision, it would be monumental. After what seemed like an eternity, the jury returned to the courtroom, their faces serious and unreadable. Judge Ramirez called the court to order. Has the jury reached a verdict? She asked. The jury foreman stood, his hands slightly trembling as he addressed the court. Yes, Your Honor. We have. The room was still, every person in it awaiting the verdict that would determine Musk's fate. The foreman turned toward the judge and began to read the decision. We, the jury, find the defendant, Elon Musk, not guilty on all counts. The words hung in the air, and for a brief moment, it felt as if time itself had stopped. Musk's heart raced, his breath catching in his throat as the verdict was read aloud. Not guilty. The tension in the room exploded into a mix of disbelief, relief, and quiet murmurs. Musk sat still for a moment, processing the enormity of the verdict. He had won, yes, but at what cost? The trial had taken everything from him. His reputation, his public image, and his peace of mind had all been stretched to the breaking point. And though the jury had ruled in his favor, he couldn't help but feel the weight of the journey he had just been through. As he stood, his legal team surrounded him with congratulations, but Musk's mind was elsewhere. He thought about what he had learned from the trial, from the confrontation with his own mistakes and the undeniable human cost of his ambition. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear, he had been given a second chance. And he would not waste it. The courtroom began to empty as the trial concluded, but Musk remained seated for a moment longer. The weight of the decision hung on him like a cloak, but it also brought clarity. And perhaps, in time, he would find a way to balance his drive with a deeper understanding of the people who had followed him all along. As he walked out of the courthouse, he glanced at the sky. The future was still ahead of him. And this time, he would approach it with a new sense of purpose. The morning after the trial, Musk woke up to the first quiet moment in weeks. The hum of the media, the tension in the courtroom, the weight of every decision he made had all seemed to fade in the aftermath of the verdict. He had been found not guilty. The relief was immense, but it felt strangely hollow. As he stared out of the window of his sleek, minimalist office in the SpaceX headquarters, the world outside seemed distant and irrelevant. The streets of Hawthorne, California, bustled with life, but Musk felt disconnected from it all. The momentous nature of the trial had overshadowed everything else, but now, standing at the precipice of a new day, he realized that it wasn't just his public image that had been fractured during the trial, it was his own understanding of who he was and what he wanted from life. For the first time in years, Musk wasn't focused solely on the next big thing. He wasn't obsessing over the next rocket launch or the newest Tesla model. He wasn't thinking about Mars or self-driving cars. Instead, he was thinking about what came after all of this, the work that he had dedicated his life to, and the cost it had exacted on his personal relationships, his health, and his own peace of mind. He had always prided himself on pushing boundaries. It had been the cornerstone of his career, from launching rockets into space to disrupting entire industries. But he couldn't help but wonder, at what cost? Musk had spent so many years charging forward without looking back that it had almost become impossible to know where to go next. There was still so much left to do. So many ideas to bring to life. But this trial, with its exposure of his most vulnerable moments, had cracked open something deeper in him. It wasn't just about innovation anymore. It was about reconciliation. The trial had revealed the flaws in his leadership, his inability to balance ambition with empathy, and the personal toll that his single-minded pursuit of success had taken on him. It wasn't a pleasant realization, but it was one that Musk couldn't ignore any longer. That morning, as the sun broke through the clouds, Musk made a decision. He wasn't going to leave behind his dream of changing the world, but he would approach it differently. He would rebuild his relationships, with his team, with his family, and most importantly, with himself. 2 days later, Musk boarded a flight to Texas to visit SpaceX's rocket testing facility. He hadn't been to the facility in months, and the truth was that he'd been avoiding it. There was always something more pressing on his schedule, something else that needed his attention. But now, with the weight of the trial lifted, he felt the need to reconnect with the very company that had been his first true passion. As the plane descended into the vast, open landscape of South Texas, Musk looked out the window, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. This wasn't just about rockets and space anymore. This was about starting anew, reconnecting with the reason he had entered this field in the first place. When the plane landed, Musk was met by a familiar face, Gina Torres, the COO of SpaceX, and one of the few people who had stuck by him through thick and thin. She greeted him with a warm smile, but there was a hint of concern in her eyes, a silent acknowledgement of everything that had transpired over the last few months. "Good to see you, Elon," she said, shaking his hand. "I heard the verdict. It's over now, but I know this has been a lot for you." Musk nodded, his gaze shifting toward the vast expanse of land around them. The SpaceX facility stretched out before him, a symbol of everything he had worked for, but also everything he had almost lost. The rockets standing tall in the distance felt like giants reaching for the heavens, but they also represented something more personal, a reminder of his own failures and successes. "I've been thinking a lot," Musk said, his voice quieter than usual. "About everything. The trial, the decisions I've made, the people who've been affected by what I've done. I've realized that it's not just about pushing for the next big thing. It's about understanding what we're doing, why we're doing it, and who we're doing it for. Gina looked at him with a mixture of understanding and curiosity. What does that mean for SpaceX? For Tesla? For everything? Musk paused for a moment, his thoughts racing. It means that we need to change. We need to change the way we operate. We need to focus not just on innovation, but on the people who make it possible. We've been so focused on the destination that we've forgotten about the journey. Gina nodded thoughtfully, understanding the depth of his words. You're talking about balance. About recognizing the cost of progress. Exactly, Musk said, his gaze fixed on the rockets in the distance. We've achieved so much. But now, it's time to focus on sustainability, not just in terms of the environment, but in terms of the people who make all of this possible. We can't continue at this pace without taking care of ourselves. And we need to start rebuilding the relationships that got us here. Over the next few weeks, Musk began to make changes, small, but significant changes. He spent more time with his teams, listening to their concerns and learning about their struggles. He made an effort to connect with his family, with his children, and with those closest to him. He took moments to rest and recharge, understanding that true leadership didn't come from relentless work but from having the clarity and strength to guide others through both good times and bad. At the same time, he continued his work on SpaceX, pushing the boundaries of space exploration with a renewed sense of purpose. The Mars mission, the next-generation Starship, and the sustainability initiatives for Tesla were still at the forefront of his mind, but now he was doing it with a sense of balance. Musk knew that the road ahead would be long and filled with challenges, but for the first time in a long while, he felt ready for it. He had learned that true greatness didn't come from sheer ambition alone, it came from understanding the impact of that ambition on the world and the people around him. As he stood in the SpaceX mission control room, watching a successful launch unfold before him, Musk smiled. He was no longer the same man who had entered the courtroom months ago, fighting for his reputation. He was a man reborn, not in the eyes of the world, but in his own heart. And with that, he turned his gaze back to the stars. The future was still ahead of him, but now, he had a better understanding of how to navigate it. Musk had always known that the future was unpredictable, but as he stood in the gleaming lobby of Tesla's headquarters in Palo Alto, California, he realized that the future was also shaped by the choices he made today. The trial was behind him, but the lessons learned were still fresh. No matter how many rockets he launched into space, no matter how many cars Tesla produced, the world, his world, was watching him more closely than ever. He had always operated at full speed. But now, there was a new purpose behind that speed, a purpose that required him to stop and think about the people he was running toward, not just the end goal. The pressure to deliver innovation was still there, but it was now tempered by the responsibility of leading with more intention. His first stop was a meeting with the senior leadership team at Tesla. As he walked into the sleek, modern boardroom, he felt a sense of familiarity, a sense of responsibility that had been missing in the rush of his earlier years. His team looked at him with a mixture of respect and curiosity. They had seen him at his best and at his worst. But this was a new Musk, and they were ready to hear him out. Thanks for joining me today, Musk began, his voice steady but warm. We've accomplished so much at Tesla. We've changed the world in ways that no one thought possible. But we all know that we can't rest on our laurels. The next phase is about ensuring that everything we do aligns with the values that got us here. Not just innovation, but sustainability in every sense of the word, environmental, financial, and, most importantly, human. He could see the puzzled looks on some faces. They were used to the old Musk, the one who demanded results above all else. But this Musk was different. I've spent a lot of time thinking about our future, not just in terms of the cars we build, but in how we lead our teams, how we treat each other, and how we make decisions. Innovation can't just be about the next big breakthrough. It has to be about how we build something that lasts, something that sustains the people who make it possible. There was a silence in the room as his words hung in the air. Musk's eyes scanned the room, and he could feel the weight of their expectations, as well as his own. He had always been the disruptor, the visionary, the one who could see the path others couldn't. But now, the challenge was different. He had to lead with more than just his ideas. He had to lead with compassion and empathy. Elon paused, letting the gravity of his words settle. He needed them to understand that this shift wasn't just a change in direction, it was a change in how they approached everything. From the design of Tesla's vehicles to the culture of their workplace. Over the years, we've been moving at a breakneck pace. We've focused so much on the product, the technology, the mission. But it's time for a shift. It's time to focus on our people, the ones who are the heartbeat of this company. We'll keep pushing the limits of what's possible, but we need to do it with an awareness that the pressure on all of us has been immense. And that pressure, if not managed, can break people. We can't afford that. He took a deep breath. We're going to implement a new initiative, something we're calling Tesla 2.0. It's a commitment to sustainability, not just in what we produce but in how we build and protect our teams. We'll invest more in mental health, work-life balance, and professional development. We'll create a culture of transparency and support, and we'll make sure that no one is left behind in the pursuit of excellence. There were a few nods of agreement around the room, though some of the younger team members looked skeptical. For them, the relentless drive that Musk embodied was what had made Tesla into the global force it was today. Could that same drive now be tempered with such a focus on balance? Musk understood their skepticism. He had been that person, the one who thought that the only way forward was through relentless effort and a focus on results. But now, he knew that no company could continue to innovate and succeed without a foundation of well-being. I know this is a big shift, and it may not be easy to implement. But I truly believe that this is the only way forward. We have to be better for each other, not just for the products we create. Let's build a legacy that we can all be proud of, not just as innovators, but as people who have done things the right way. As the meeting wrapped up, there was a sense of cautious optimism in the room. Musk knew it wasn't going to be easy. Changing the culture of a company wasn't something that happened overnight. But he was committed to it. And he knew that Tesla's future would be brighter if he led not only with his vision but with a more thoughtful and balanced approach. Weeks passed, and the implementation of Tesla 2.0 began. Some of the changes were immediate. There were workshops on mental health, seminars on leadership and stress management, and new systems for checking in with employees about their workload. Musk personally reached out to several employees, asking them how they were feeling about the changes. Many were hesitant, unsure of how to respond to the new focus on wellness and work-life balance. But as the weeks turned into months, the effects started to show. Productivity didn't dip. In fact, it seemed to increase. Employees were happier, more engaged, and more creative. The company's culture had shifted from one of relentless ambition to one of sustainable progress. There was still pressure to innovate, to produce, but there was also an understanding that this couldn't come at the expense of the people who made it all happen. Musk himself felt the change. He was no longer burning the candle at both ends, sacrificing sleep and health in the name of progress. He found time for his family again, rekindling relationships with his children and re-establishing the connection with his ex-wife, Tallulah. He took more time to reflect and reassess, stepping back when necessary to ensure he was making decisions that aligned with his new values. The trial had been a turning point. It had revealed his vulnerabilities, but it had also opened his eyes to what really mattered. And now, as Tesla began to thrive in this new phase, he realized that this was what success truly looked like. For the first time in his life, Elon Musk was leading with both his mind and his heart. Musk sat alone in the quiet of his office late one evening. The soft glow of the desk lamp illuminated the space around him, but his mind was elsewhere, lost in a sea of thoughts about the future, about the people he had hurt, and the lessons he was still learning. The echoes of the trial, the confrontations in the courtroom, and the media frenzy were all behind him. Yet, the scars they left still lingered in his psyche. The Tesla 2.0 initiative had been a success, but Musk knew that a single cultural shift wouldn't be enough to restore everything that had been damaged. The last few years had been a blur of court cases, negative press, and personal strain. It wasn't just his business empire that had suffered, it was his personal relationships, his health, and his sense of peace. As he sat at his desk, Musk thought about the people who had stood by him through it all, those who had seen the flaws, the arrogance, the intensity, and yet chose to stay by his side. Gina Torres, his right-hand woman at SpaceX, had remained unwavering in her support. She had been the voice of reason when everything seemed to be falling apart, the one person who saw beyond the headlines and understood the man behind the ambition. But the most important relationship that had been severely tested was with his family, his children, his ex-wife Tallulah, and the people who had seen him not just as a visionary, but as a father, a partner, and a friend. The drive to succeed had consumed him for years, and in doing so, it had put walls between him and the people he loved most. He realized that to truly find redemption, he would need to rebuild those bridges. It wasn't enough to focus on his companies or his public image, he had to make amends with the people who mattered most. The following week, Musk reached out to Tallulah Riley, his ex-wife. Their relationship had been tumultuous, marked by multiple breakups and reconciliations. Yet despite the fractures, there had always been an unspoken bond between them. They shared a history, and Musk knew that rebuilding their relationship, however it would unfold, was crucial. He sent her a simple text, "Can we meet? I've been thinking about a lot of things, and I'd like to talk." Tallulah's response came a few hours later, "Sure, I'm free tomorrow afternoon." The next day, they met at a quiet cafe in Santa Monica, the kind of place where they could talk without interruption. As Musk walked in, he spotted Tallulah sitting at a corner table, looking calm and composed as always. Despite their years apart, there was a familiarity in her presence that made Musk feel both comforted and nervous. He took a deep breath and sat down across from her. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, his voice uncharacteristically gentle. "I know we've been through a lot, and I want to start by saying I'm sorry." Tallulah raised an eyebrow. She had always known that Musk was capable of introspection, but it was rare to see him so vulnerable. "Elon," she began softly, "you don't have to apologize. We've both made mistakes. But what matters now is what happens next." Musk nodded, grateful for her understanding. "I've spent so much time chasing success, chasing the next big thing, that I lost sight of the people who matter the most. And I can't keep doing that. I want to rebuild things with you, with our kids, and make up for the time I've lost." There was a long pause as Tallulah considered his words. She had always been fond of Musk's ambition, but his single-mindedness had often made her feel invisible. Still, she had seen glimpses of the man he could be, and she wasn't ready to close the door completely. "I think," she said after a moment, "that you've come to realize something that I've always known. That there's more to life than just work. But that's something we have to figure out together. We can't go back to how things were, but maybe we can find a way forward, one step at a time." Musk smiled, a mix of relief and determination in his eyes. "I'm willing to try. I know I can't change the past, but I want to make things right, for all of us." They talked for hours, revisiting old memories and discussing what the future could look like. It wasn't an easy conversation, and it wasn't a solution to all their problems, but it was a start. For the first time in a long while, Musk felt a glimmer of hope, not just for his business, but for his personal life as well. After his meeting with Tallulah, Musk turned his attention back to his children. His relationship with them had always been a source of pride, but his work had taken him away from them for long stretches. He made it a point to spend more time with them, to show up for the moments that mattered. He learned to listen more, to be present, and to understand what they needed from him as a father. It wasn't easy. There were still many hurdles to overcome, old wounds that hadn't healed, habits that were hard to break. But every day, Musk worked at it. He attended school plays, took them on hikes, and made an effort to be more than just the distant figure who showed up occasionally. Slowly, he rebuilt the trust and connection that had been strained over the years. One afternoon, as he sat on the couch with his son X, building a model rocket together, Musk looked at his child and realized something profound. This moment, this simple, quiet moment, was the most important achievement he would ever have. As the months passed, Musk's journey of redemption continued. He didn't expect instant results or to be forgiven overnight. But he understood that change wasn't about perfection, it was about progress, no matter how small. His work at Tesla and SpaceX didn't slow down. He was still pushing the boundaries of innovation, still dreaming of sending humans to Mars, still focused on the mission. But now, he approached it with a sense of balance. His decisions were more thoughtful, his leadership more empathetic, and his vision for the future clearer. He had learned that true redemption wasn't found in winning battles or gaining accolades. It was found in the quiet moments of personal growth, in the relationships that were rebuilt, and in the understanding that the cost of success wasn't just measured in dollars, but in the lives of those you touched. And as Musk stood in the control room at SpaceX, watching the launch of a new rocket, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of peace. This wasn't just a successful mission. It was a new chapter in his life, one where his legacy would be defined not only by the stars he reached for but by the people he had learned to appreciate. The success of Tesla 2.0 and his personal journey of reconciliation had changed Musk more than he anticipated. For years, he had been consumed by the relentless pursuit of progress, an insatiable drive to conquer whatever lay ahead. But now, in the quiet moments, he was beginning to realize that true progress wasn't measured by the next great idea or the latest breakthrough, it was measured by the relationships he had nurtured and the people he had become. He had learned to listen, to be present, and to take a step back when necessary. His work had always been at the core of his identity, but he was beginning to understand that without the support of the people around him, his dreams would remain just that, dreams. One of the pivotal turning points came in the form of a visit to the Tesla Gigafactory in Nevada. Musk had not been back to the factory in months, and the thought of revisiting the sprawling facility, where the magic of electric vehicles had first started to take shape, was daunting. The workers there had seen him at his best and worst. But he wasn't just the CEO today. He was someone who had learned that leadership meant more than just pushing for results. As he walked through the factory floor, Musk felt a sense of awe and respect for the people who were making the vision a reality. These were the workers, the engineers, the dreamers who poured their sweat and skills into the product. And for the first time, he didn't feel the need to rush past them in search of the next goal. Instead, he slowed down, spoke to people directly, and thanked them for their dedication. There was a moment when he paused in front of a group of assembly line workers, who had been there since the early days. "You've all worked so hard to get us to this point," Musk said, his voice resonating with sincerity. "I'm proud of what we've built together. But I also know that we've been pushing so hard that we've forgotten to take care of ourselves and each other. That's something I'm going to work on. We're all in this together." The workers, many of whom had never seen Musk speak so openly, nodded in agreement. It was a small moment, but it marked the beginning of a new culture at Tesla, one that balanced ambition with a sense of community and support. Musk made it clear that Tesla 2.0 wasn't just a corporate initiative, it was a mindset shift, a recognition that progress wasn't just about output but about how they treated each other along the way. As the workers went back to their tasks, Musk knew that the road ahead would be challenging. But he also knew that the support and respect of his team were more important than any product launch or space mission. Later that evening, Musk sat down with his senior leadership team, including Gina Torres, who had been by his side through the thick of it all. They had a lot to discuss, everything from new product development to improving company culture, but Musk had something else on his mind. "I want to talk about something that's been weighing on me," he began. "We've always focused on speed and results. And while that's important, I think we've overlooked something crucial, our people's well-being. I want us to invest more in mental health resources, work-life balance, and ensuring that we have a supportive environment for everyone here. We can't keep pushing at this pace if we don't take care of each other. Gina looked at him with a raised eyebrow. I've always known you were focused on innovation, Elon. But this is a different side of you. I like it. Musk chuckled. It's been a long time coming. I think the hardest part of all this has been learning to stop, to listen, and to understand the impact of our decisions. But it's something we need to address, and I'm committed to making sure it's a priority. They discussed strategies for implementing new employee wellness programs, revising work expectations, and creating a more inclusive and supportive work environment. Musk knew that change would take time, but it was necessary. For the first time in a long while, he felt a deep sense of responsibility not just to his shareholders and customers, but to his employees. Back at home, Musk found that his newfound commitment to balance was also impacting his personal life. He spent more time with his children, attending their school events and supporting their individual passions. He made a point of showing up for the small moments, the bedtime stories, the weekend hikes, the quiet dinners together. It was a work in progress, but his children responded positively. They could see that he was trying, and they began to open up more, sharing their thoughts and feelings in ways they hadn't before. One evening, as Musk sat in the living room with his son X, they played with toy rockets, imagining far-off planets and distant stars. Musk found himself smiling, not because of some grand vision of the future, but because of this simple, shared moment. One day, I'll take you to space, Musk said, his voice playful but filled with genuine promise. X looked up at him with wide eyes. Will I get to ride in a real rocket? Absolutely, Musk answered with a wink. But we've got a lot of work to do before that happens. It was moments like these that made all the struggle and sacrifice worthwhile. Musk realized that while he had been chasing the stars for most of his life, the true treasures were the relationships he had neglected. He knew that his success wouldn't be measured by the number of rockets launched or the number of electric vehicles sold, but by the legacy he left behind with the people who mattered most. And so, the journey continued. As SpaceX launched a new satellite into orbit and Tesla unveiled their latest self-driving technology, Musk couldn't help but feel a sense of contentment. The road ahead was still full of challenges, but it was no longer a race against time. It was a path that included both professional achievement and personal growth. He had spent years running at full speed, chasing the next goal, the next innovation. But now, he was learning that the true power of leadership wasn't in how fast you could run, it was in how well you could pace yourself, how well you could bring others along for the ride, and how well you could be present for the journey. And as he stood on the balcony of his home that evening, looking out at the sprawling horizon, Musk knew that he had only just begun to redefine what success meant. It wasn't about conquering the stars. It was about understanding the people around him and learning to lead with both his mind and his heart. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The months following Musk's renewed commitment to personal growth and workplace culture were filled with both victories and challenges. Tesla and SpaceX continued to thrive, with Tesla's electric vehicles becoming more popular than ever, and SpaceX achieving greater milestones in its space exploration endeavors. However, Musk knew that his legacy was no longer solely defined by his company's success. It was now deeply intertwined with his ability to inspire and nurture the people around him, his employees, his family, and even his critics. Yet, despite the positive changes in his personal life and leadership approach, a nagging question lingered in his mind: what would his legacy truly be? It was a question that had haunted Musk for as long as he could remember. For years, his obsession with revolutionizing industries and pushing the boundaries of possibility had been his guiding force. But now, as his perspective on life shifted, he found himself wondering if there was more to his story than just groundbreaking inventions and corporate achievements. One evening, after a long day filled with meetings and calls, Musk found himself walking through his home office, surrounded by accolades, awards, and blueprints of ambitious projects yet to come. On the desk, there was a small family photo, one from a time when life seemed simpler. His children were young, their faces filled with innocence and joy. That image struck Musk deeply. His children had always been a part of his life, but he hadn't always been there for them in the way they needed. The realization stung. Musk had long been aware of the sacrifices he had made for his vision. But standing there, alone in his office, it became clear that in striving to leave a legacy through his work, he had at times left behind the people who mattered most. His legacy, he now understood, wasn't just about creating electric cars or reaching Mars. It was about the impact he had on the lives of those around him. As the quiet hum of the house settled in, he picked up his phone and sent a text to his son X, "Hey buddy, how about we do something fun this weekend? Just you and me. I'll make sure we keep the weekend free." X's response came almost immediately, "Sounds awesome, Dad. What are we going to do?" Musk smiled at the reply, feeling a warmth in his chest that had been absent for too long. He knew that no matter what grand achievement awaited him, the most meaningful moments would be spent here, with his family, with those who had supported him from the start. The next weekend, Musk and X spent the day at the beach. It was a simple outing, but for Musk, it was a revelation. As they built sandcastles, ran along the shoreline, and laughed together, Musk realized that this was what life was really about, these quiet, shared experiences, free from the pressure of deadlines or media scrutiny. For the first time in years, Musk allowed himself to truly relax, to forget about the weight of his responsibilities, and to just be present. As they walked along the beach, X tugged at Musk's hand. "Dad, do you think we'll ever go to Mars for real?" Musk smiled down at his son. "I think that one day, we will. It's just a matter of time." "But when?" X pressed, his eyes wide with excitement. Musk crouched down to his son's level. "I can't promise when, but I can promise that we'll do everything we can to make it happen." The moment was brief, but for Musk, it was powerful. He realized that his legacy would not just be about what he achieved, but about the hope he inspired in others, the same hope that had driven him to reach for the stars in the first place. It was about the future he was helping to shape for the next generation, and the people he was empowering to dream big. Back at the office, Musk's thoughts on legacy continued to linger. A meeting with his leadership team at Tesla had gone well. There was much excitement around their upcoming projects, including advancements in self-driving technology and plans for the next-generation solar panels. But as he looked around the room at his colleagues, some of whom had been with him for years, a realization struck him: the company had become more than just a business venture, it had become a community. Musk knew that his leadership had shifted. It was no longer about sheer force of will or pushing people to their limits. It was about creating a space where people could thrive, where they could contribute to a shared vision of sustainability, innovation, and possibility. During the meeting, one of the senior engineers, Maria, stood up to speak. "Elon," she said, "I've been working here for over a decade now, and I can honestly say that the culture you've been fostering here, it's changing lives. We're more than just employees. We're a team, a family, working together to make the world a better place." Musk sat back in his chair, struck by her words. For so long, he had seen himself as a visionary, a leader with a singular focus. But now, he understood that leadership wasn't about pushing others to follow his path, it was about creating a path that others could walk alongside him. Later that week, Musk attended a conference on sustainability, where he was invited to speak about the future of space exploration and clean energy. As he took the stage, the familiar rush of excitement and nerves filled him. The crowd was eager to hear from one of the most famous innovators of the 21st century. But as he looked out over the sea of faces, Musk felt something different. He wasn't just there to talk about rockets or electric vehicles. He was there to speak about the future, the kind of future that could only be realized if humanity worked together. It was a future where innovation was powered by empathy, where success was measured not just in profit, but in the well-being of the planet and its people. Today, Musk began, his voice steady and strong, we stand on the cusp of something incredible. We have the power to change the course of history, to create a future that is sustainable, equitable, and bright. But that future won't be built on technology alone. It will be built on collaboration, on understanding, and on the willingness to act together. As the audience applauded, Musk felt a profound shift within himself. He was no longer just a businessman. He was part of a greater movement, a movement that had the potential to change not just industries, but the very way humanity thought about its future. That evening, Musk sat alone in his hotel room, reflecting on his speech. He had always been driven by the desire to leave a legacy of innovation, but now, he understood that his true legacy would be one of unity, of bringing people together to solve the world's greatest challenges. It wasn't just about the stars. It was about the planet beneath his feet. As he prepared for bed, Musk glanced out the window at the city skyline, the lights twinkling like distant stars. The path forward was unclear, and the challenges ahead were daunting. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. He had found his true calling, not just as a visionary or a leader, but as someone committed to building a future that benefited all. And with that, he finally understood what his legacy would be. Not one of individual success, but a shared journey, one where everyone had a role to play, and the future was brighter for all. As the months went by, Elon Musk's approach to leadership and life continued to evolve. He was no longer the intense, hyper-focused entrepreneur of his earlier years, obsessed solely with groundbreaking technological advances and the next big disruption. Instead, he had become more introspective, often reflecting on how his actions affected not only his companies but also the world around him. The company's trajectory was a testament to that change. Tesla, with its renewed commitment to employee well-being, had launched several new initiatives aimed at reducing the environmental footprint of its manufacturing processes. SpaceX, which had once been known for its aggressive push toward commercial space travel, now incorporated more sustainable practices and sought out ways to collaborate with governments and other companies to ensure that space exploration was a shared global effort. But the true turning point came when Musk received an unexpected invitation, a call from the United Nations. It was a Wednesday morning when Musk's phone buzzed with an incoming call from an unknown number. He had been busy with back-to-back meetings, and the last thing he expected was to hear from a global organization like the United Nations. "Hello?" Musk answered, his curiosity piqued. "Mr. Musk, this is Dr. Elena Rodriguez from the United Nations. We've been following your work closely and the changes you've made at Tesla and SpaceX over the past year. The leadership you've shown in fostering a more balanced and sustainable future for both your companies and the planet is truly commendable." Musk leaned back in his chair, intrigued. "Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. It's been a challenging but rewarding year, and I appreciate your recognition. We believe," Dr. Rodriguez continued, "that you are uniquely positioned to influence global sustainability efforts in ways that many others can't. The UN is looking to expand its partnerships with private sector leaders, and we would like to invite you to speak at an upcoming conference on sustainable technology." Musk was taken aback by the invitation. He had spoken at many tech conferences and corporate events, but this was different. This was an opportunity to speak on the global stage, surrounded by leaders from all over the world, about something he had come to deeply care about, the planet's future. "I'd be honored to be part of such an important conversation," Musk replied, the weight of the opportunity starting to sink in. "What's the focus of the conference?" "Climate change, energy solutions, and how technology can be harnessed for the greater good of the planet," Dr. Rodriguez explained. "We need visionary leaders who aren't just thinking about innovation for the sake of innovation, but innovation with a purpose. We believe you're one of those leaders." Musk paused for a moment. It wasn't just about promoting his companies anymore. It was about creating a sustainable future for everyone. "I'll be there," he said, with renewed conviction in his voice. The weeks leading up to the United Nations conference were filled with preparation. Musk didn't just want to show up and give a speech, he wanted to ensure that his message was impactful, that it resonated with people in a way that inspired real change. He worked closely with his team, crafting a speech that was not only about his company's achievements but about the global responsibility each of them shared in protecting the planet. He also reached out to his closest allies, his leadership team, as well as a few trusted friends and mentors, to get feedback on his ideas. One of the conversations that stood out to him was with Gina Torres, who had been instrumental in helping him reshape Tesla's company culture. "Elon," she said one evening after a long meeting, "you're doing something remarkable here, but don't forget about the human element. People don't just want to hear about the technology, they want to know how it affects their lives. How it affects their families. You're inspiring because you've made innovation about the world, not just your vision." Her words stayed with him. As he prepared for the speech, he made sure to focus on not just the promises of innovation, but also the human side of it, the families whose lives would be improved by clean energy, the communities that would benefit from new, sustainable technologies, and the children who would inherit the earth if they succeeded. The day of the conference arrived, and Musk stood in front of a vast crowd in the UN headquarters in New York City. Leaders from various industries, countries, and non-governmental organizations filled the room. The air was thick with anticipation. Musk had always thrived in high-pressure environments, but today, the stakes felt higher than ever. This wasn't just about impressing a room full of business people, it was about creating a lasting ripple effect, one that could inspire global change. As he walked up to the podium, he noticed the diverse group of individuals in the audience. He saw the faces of world leaders, young activists, scientists, and educators, all of them eager to hear what he had to say. His heart raced, but he knew that the work he had done in the last few years had prepared him for this moment. He began. "Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez, for that kind introduction," Musk said, his voice steady. "And thank you to the United Nations for inviting me to speak today. I am honored to be here among so many brilliant minds, and I recognize the gravity of the situation we find ourselves in." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle. "For years, we have treated the Earth as a resource to be exploited, not as a fragile ecosystem that sustains all life. We've known for a long time that climate change is a reality, but too many have chosen to ignore it, to push it aside in favor of short-term profits and growth. But the truth is, the time to act is now, and the power to change is in our hands." The room fell silent as he continued. "At Tesla, we're committed to creating sustainable energy solutions, but the responsibility doesn't end with us. We can't do this alone. This is a global effort, and we need every industry, every government, and every individual to get involved. We need to think not just about the technology we create but about the lives it impacts." As he spoke, Musk saw nods of agreement from various corners of the room. This was a message they were ready to hear. He knew that the ripples of this speech wouldn't just affect the people in the room, they would extend far beyond, reaching communities and industries across the world. Later that evening, after the speech had concluded, Musk walked through the bustling streets of New York, reflecting on the experience. The reception had been overwhelmingly positive. People were talking about the ideas he had shared, and there was a sense of urgency in the air, something had shifted. For the first time, he felt like his vision for the future was no longer just a dream, it was something people were ready to fight for. And as he stood on the balcony of his hotel room, looking out over the city skyline, he felt the weight of what he had just begun. His companies, his work, his passion, everything had led him to this moment. But it wasn't just about him anymore. It was about the planet. It was about the people. It was about making the world a better place for those who would come after him. The ripple had begun. And Musk knew that it would grow. In the weeks following his appearance at the United Nations, Elon Musk felt the magnitude of his words and actions more profoundly than ever before. The conference had been a turning point, both for his personal evolution and for his company's. The ripples of his speech about sustainability had spread across the globe, leading to new partnerships, new ideas, and new challenges. Despite the praise and recognition, Musk found himself in a moment of quiet reflection. The weight of the responsibility he carried now seemed heavier than ever before. He had often been accused of being a visionary, but now, the consequences of his vision were real. The world had taken notice. The companies he had built, the technologies he had pioneered, and the movements he had sparked were no longer just ideas, they were the future of humanity. It was a quiet Friday evening when Musk sat in his office, staring at a series of projections for SpaceX's Mars colonization plans. The images before him were awe-inspiring, showing cities on Mars, thriving ecosystems, and a bustling human presence on the red planet. But as Musk looked at the simulations, he couldn't shake the feeling of unease creeping into his mind. For years, he had spoken passionately about sending humans to Mars, about the potential of humanity becoming a multiplanetary species. He had always believed that space exploration was the key to securing the long-term survival of the human race. Yet now, after his speech at the UN, his focus had shifted. Was it enough to build a future on another planet while ignoring the one that sustained humanity for millennia? Could he truly claim to have a positive legacy if his work on Earth wasn't just as impactful as his work in space? He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. The questions seemed endless. There was a growing sense of urgency in the world regarding climate change, poverty, and inequality. Musk had spent so many years focused on the technological wonders he was creating, but now, with the weight of global scrutiny upon him, he felt a deeper obligation to make a difference on Earth as well. It was no longer just about innovation for the sake of innovation, it was about survival, equality, and sustainability. A knock on the door broke his thoughts. "Come in," Musk called out. His assistant, Olivia, entered with a folder in her hand. "Elon, these are the reports you asked for on the progress of the new solar energy initiatives and the electric vehicle expansion in developing markets." "Thanks, Olivia," Musk said, taking the folder. He flipped through the pages, scanning the data. It was promising. Tesla's new solar solutions were being well received in emerging markets, and the expansion of electric vehicles into rural areas was gaining momentum. But there was something in the back of his mind that gnawed at him. It wasn't enough. "Do we have any updates on the global supply chain issues for sustainable materials?" Musk asked, his voice steady but concerned. Olivia hesitated. "It's been a challenge. The materials needed for battery production and solar components are still limited, and the environmental impact of sourcing them is becoming a bigger issue." Musk sighed, rubbing his temples. "This isn't just about making a profit or meeting quotas. We need to revolutionize how we produce these materials. If we're going to make a real impact, we have to change the entire system, how these resources are mined, how they're transported, and how we recycle them." Olivia nodded. "I'll get the team on it immediately. But Elon, are you okay? You seem a little distant." Musk paused, looking at his assistant. "I'm fine. Just thinking about everything." Later that evening, Musk went for a walk around his property. The evening sky was dark, the stars shining brightly above. As he gazed at the constellations, his thoughts drifted to the future, both the one on Earth and the one on Mars. He had always believed that humanity's path to survival lay in the stars. But now, with the urgency of climate change pressing down on the planet, he realized that perhaps his true legacy would not be one of escaping Earth but saving it. He thought back to the speech he had delivered at the UN, the conviction in his voice when he spoke about collaboration and responsibility. Could his companies truly make a difference? Would people take him seriously if he continued to push for Mars exploration while ignoring the very real problems facing Earth? The shift in perspective had been gradual, but now it felt unavoidable. The two objectives, sustainable Earth and space exploration, were not separate entities. They were intertwined. His vision for the future would only be complete if it embraced both. The next day, Musk called an emergency meeting with his leadership teams at both Tesla and SpaceX. He needed to align his companies with this new perspective, a perspective that prioritized Earth's sustainability and social equality as much as it prioritized technological innovation and space exploration. This wasn't just about cutting-edge technology anymore. It was about creating a balance between innovation and sustainability that would ripple across industries and governments alike. As the team gathered around the conference table, Musk addressed them with a sense of urgency that was different from anything they had seen before. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Musk began, pacing the room. "For years, we've been focused on changing the world through groundbreaking technology, clean energy, electric vehicles, rockets to Mars. But I'm realizing now that we've been neglecting something fundamental, the social impact of what we're doing." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. "We've revolutionized industries, yes. But we need to do more. We need to ask ourselves how our innovations are helping people, not just with sustainability, but with accessibility, equality, and opportunity. The future we're building must benefit everyone, not just those who can afford a $100,000 car or a trip to Mars." The room was silent, the team members exchanging glances. Musk had always been demanding, but now his tone was different. It was a call to action, not just for business as usual, but for something more profound. "We have the resources, we have the technology, and we have the vision. Now, we need to rethink how we build this future. How can we ensure that clean energy solutions are accessible to low-income communities? How can we expand the impact of our technologies on a global scale? How can we help bridge the gap between the privileged few and the majority who are struggling to get by?" One of Tesla's senior engineers, Aiden, spoke up. "Elon, this is big. You're talking about social change, not just technological change." "But I agree. We need to think beyond profits and shareholder value. We need to ask how our work can truly help people, especially those who need it most." Musk nodded. "Exactly. We can't just look at profit margins or quarterly earnings anymore. We need to redefine success. And we need to start now." As the meeting concluded, Musk felt a renewed sense of purpose. He had always been a man driven by the desire to revolutionize industries, but now he was more committed than ever to using his position to address global inequality and sustainability. As he left the office, he glanced up at the sky once more. The stars were as bright as ever, a reminder of the vastness of the universe and the potential that lay beyond. But for the first time in a long while, Musk understood that his greatest challenge wasn't reaching the stars, it was ensuring that the planet beneath his feet was worthy of the future he dreamed of. The realization that Musk's vision for the future had to be about more than just groundbreaking technology hit him with full force. After the meeting with his leadership teams, he found himself working late into the night, drafting a new strategic plan for Tesla and SpaceX. It wasn't just about sustainability anymore, it was about creating a future that was equitable, that empowered people at all levels of society, regardless of their financial status, and that took into account the urgency of the environmental crisis. But just as Musk was trying to move forward with his new vision, another major crisis began to loom on the horizon. It was the sort of crisis that no one had expected, one that would challenge not only Musk's leadership but also his resolve to stay true to his ideals. It began with a headline. "Tesla under fire, allegations of environmental harm in supply chain," the headline read. The article outlined serious accusations against Tesla's suppliers, particularly those responsible for mining lithium and cobalt for the company's batteries. Investigative journalists had uncovered troubling reports about environmental destruction, human rights violations, and unsafe working conditions in some of the countries where these materials were sourced. What was even more disturbing was that some of these suppliers were part of the very same companies Tesla had partnered with for years. Musk sat frozen in his office, reading the article over and over. His first instinct was disbelief. Tesla had always prided itself on its commitment to sustainability, both in its products and its operations. It had been his lifelong mission to make electric vehicles the gold standard in reducing carbon emissions, and now, his company was being accused of inadvertently fueling the very problems it sought to solve. The weight of the accusations hit him hard. This wasn't just a PR nightmare, it was a crisis of conscience. The next day, as the media firestorm continued to grow, Musk convened an emergency meeting with his executives and legal team. "We have to take immediate action," Musk began, pacing in front of the group. His face was tight with frustration. "We cannot let these accusations stand. We need to launch a full investigation into the supply chain, and we need to do it transparently. If we've failed in any way, we own up to it." His legal team responded quickly, outlining a series of legal strategies to mitigate the damage, including denying any wrongdoing and issuing a public statement about investigating the situation. However, Musk's mind was already racing in a different direction. "We're not going to deny anything," Musk said firmly. "We're going to fix it. We're going to audit the entire supply chain and replace any partners who don't meet our sustainability standards. We need to be the company that leads by example, not the company that hides behind corporate lawyers." One of Tesla's senior directors, Leah, raised her hand. "Elon, we've always strived to work with the best suppliers, but this is a global problem. Sourcing these materials is inherently difficult, especially when dealing with countries that have weak environmental regulations and labor laws." "I know that," Musk replied, his voice hardening. "But it's on us to change it. We've built Tesla to be the future of sustainable energy, and if we want to truly lead, we need to do better. This goes beyond greenwashing. We need to set a new standard for the entire industry." Musk was relentless. He ordered the supply chain overhaul immediately, promising to partner with new suppliers that adhered to strict environmental and ethical guidelines. But the battle wasn't just about restructuring Tesla's operations, it was about repairing his own reputation, and the reputation of his companies, that was now at risk. As news of Tesla's proactive response spread, public sentiment began to shift. The transparency Musk insisted on, and his willingness to take responsibility, earned him respect. Yet, the accusations remained, and the media scrutiny was far from over. The pressure was mounting. But Musk's attention wasn't only on Tesla's immediate crisis. He was also concerned about SpaceX. He had been so focused on the Earth-side issues that he hadn't fully thought through the environmental impact of his rocket launches, the carbon emissions, and the waste left behind by the frequent missions. Just as Tesla's reputation had been in jeopardy, now SpaceX's future, and its green mission to make space exploration sustainable, was under the microscope. In the coming days, Musk faced one of the most challenging decisions of his career: should he pivot SpaceX's focus to incorporate cleaner, more sustainable technologies into its operations, even if it meant slowing progress toward Mars exploration? Could he afford to continue pushing forward with his plans for interplanetary colonization when there was still so much to address on Earth? He was pacing again, this time in his home office. The days were blending together in a haze of stress, phone calls, and meetings. His mind raced, torn between two competing objectives: the dream of colonizing Mars and the immediate, pressing need to tackle climate change on Earth. It was in this state of exhaustion that he got an unexpected call. "Elon," it was Gina Torres, his trusted ally and confidant. "I've been following the news. It's a mess. But listen to me, you're at a crossroads. You've always said that humanity needs to think beyond itself. Mars is part of that. But Earth? Earth needs you now. You've got the power to change everything, Elon. But you've got to put it all on the line." Musk paused. The words hit him with a clarity he had been searching for. "What do you mean, Gina? You've got the technology, the resources, and the voice to fix this. But you've got to lead from the front. Do what you always do, disrupt the system. But do it in a way that serves everyone. Don't let this scandal define you. Let it be the catalyst for something bigger." Musk took a deep breath. It was as if everything had fallen into place. He had been trying to juggle both Earth and Mars, not realizing that his true mission was to use the technologies he had built to heal the planet first, to make a positive, lasting impact, and then expand humanity's reach to the stars. Mars couldn't come at the cost of Earth. The next morning, Musk made a decision. He would step back from some of the more aggressive Mars plans and direct SpaceX's resources into developing reusable rockets with zero emissions. He would take the lessons learned from the Tesla supply chain crisis and apply them to every facet of his operations. It was time to lead by example, to show the world that sustainability didn't have to be a sacrifice, it could be the way forward. He addressed his teams with newfound conviction. "Now is the time for a new kind of leadership," Musk said, standing before his team at both Tesla and SpaceX. "We've made mistakes, but we'll learn from them and create the world we all want to live in. We won't stop working on space exploration, but we'll do it with the responsibility we owe to this planet. The future is about balance. The journey ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be setbacks, resistance, and more difficult decisions. But Musk had made a choice. And with that choice, he knew he was ready for the reckoning that lay ahead." The weeks following Musk's decision to refocus both Tesla and SpaceX on sustainability and responsible innovation were filled with intense work and strategic planning. He had made a public commitment to address the environmental issues within his companies, but now the hard work of realigning his organizations to meet those goals had begun. Musk knew that change wasn't going to happen overnight, and the challenges ahead were monumental, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. Musk stood in front of a large whiteboard in the conference room at Tesla's headquarters. His leadership team had gathered for a meeting, and the mood in the room was different. There was a sense of anticipation, of expectation that Musk's new vision wasn't just a passing idea, it was a future to be created. "We've come a long way," Musk began, his voice firm but filled with a quiet resolve. "But we've also learned some hard lessons. The truth is, we've been pushing ahead so fast that we didn't fully account for the impact our actions were having on people and the planet. I made a commitment to you all that we would take responsibility, and that's exactly what we're going to do." He paused, looking around at the faces of the team. "It's not enough to just make electric vehicles or solar products anymore. We need to create a blueprint for how sustainable technologies can be integrated into every part of the global economy. We need to create systems that change the way we consume energy, how we manufacture products, and how we view the relationship between technology and the environment." Musk's words hung in the air, and for the first time, the enormity of the task ahead seemed to settle over the group. There were no more lofty promises or vague visions of a cleaner, greener future. The work now was about details, about building a roadmap for the transition to a sustainable world. Meanwhile, over at SpaceX, the pressure to find solutions to the environmental concerns around rocket launches was also mounting. Musk had always envisioned space exploration as part of humanity's future, but he couldn't ignore the fact that SpaceX's operations, despite their innovation, still had a considerable carbon footprint. Rocket launches were an energy-intensive process, and the question that weighed heavily on Musk's mind was, how could SpaceX make space exploration sustainable? Musk had already ordered the team at SpaceX to work on developing reusable rockets with zero emissions, but it wasn't as simple as retrofitting existing designs. The technology required new approaches, new fuels, and innovative ways of managing the energy demands of space travel. He called together a group of top engineers to brainstorm. "We need to think beyond what's been done before," Musk told them, his face lit by the soft glow of the conference room lights. SpaceX's mission has always been to make space travel more accessible, more cost-efficient, and sustainable. But now, we have to make it green. How can we make a launch that doesn't cost the Earth? What new materials can we use? How can we lower emissions without compromising on speed or efficiency? The engineers had plenty of ideas, but the reality was that developing a truly sustainable rocket was going to take time and resources. Musk was determined, though. He had never been one to shy away from ambitious goals, and he knew that this challenge was no different. The media coverage of Tesla's supply chain overhaul and SpaceX's new environmental focus was mixed. Some outlets praised Musk's bold stance, while others questioned whether it was all just a PR move. But Musk was undeterred. He had learned long ago that true change rarely came easily or without resistance. One evening, as he walked through the SpaceX campus, he bumped into Leah, one of his lead engineers who had been working on the new rocket designs. "How's the progress?" Musk asked. Leah hesitated for a moment, her expression thoughtful. "It's going well, but the technology is still in its infancy. We're making breakthroughs in sustainable fuel options, but there's a lot more to work out. We're looking at a few promising new materials, but it's hard to say when we'll have a fully sustainable launch system." Musk nodded, appreciating her honesty. "Take the time you need. But remember, we're not just doing this for us. We're doing it for the future of space exploration, and for Earth. Our technologies can't just be revolutionary in space. They need to change the way humanity thinks about its relationship with the planet." Leah smiled. "I know, Elon. We're all committed to that." The transition to sustainability wasn't just a challenge for Musk's companies, it was a challenge for the world. And that realization brought him back to the roots of his work, his belief that change required everyone to be part of it. That was why Musk had reached out to global leaders, industries, and even governments to push for broader, systemic shifts toward sustainability. If his companies were going to lead the way, they needed to inspire a global movement. With this in mind, Musk invited several key international figures to a summit at the SpaceX headquarters in Hawthorne. The gathering included environmental activists, government representatives, and thought leaders from across industries. The aim was clear: to create a roadmap for global sustainability in a world rapidly running out of time. The room was filled with a sense of urgency. The climate crisis wasn't something that could be solved by one company, one person, or one government. But together, there was hope. As Musk addressed the room, he felt the weight of the world on his shoulders, but for the first time, it felt like a collective effort. "We have the technology," Musk began, his voice strong. "We have the vision. But now, we need the commitment. Sustainability can't be a luxury, it has to be a necessity. Our work must benefit everyone, not just the privileged few. And we have to make it accessible. We need to ensure that no one is left behind in this transformation." As the summit continued, Musk listened intently to the voices around him. The solutions were complex and multifaceted, everything from renewable energy grids to carbon capture technologies, from electric infrastructure to policy changes. But for the first time, the conversation was shifting from one of individual efforts to a collective vision. There was agreement on the urgency of action, and everyone in the room was ready to take the next steps. As the summit drew to a close, Musk felt a sense of accomplishment that had eluded him for years. The work was just beginning, but there was now a shared understanding among all involved that this was not just a task for one man or one company. It was a global responsibility. On his way out of the building, as the night sky stretched out before him, Musk felt a quiet resolve. His companies, his ambitions, and his ideas were no longer just about achieving personal success, they were about pushing humanity toward a better future. A future where Earth and space could coexist, where technological progress could bring about a more sustainable, equitable world. He turned to the stars above, knowing that his journey, though far from over, had taken a definitive turn towards something far more profound than he had ever imagined. The events of the past few months had been nothing short of transformative for Musk. His decision to take on the environmental challenges head-on, both within his companies and in the wider world, was starting to show signs of progress. But as any visionary knows, the road to redemption is never straightforward. Every triumph seemed to be followed by an equal, if not greater, setback. And as Musk's ambitious goals grew, so too did the scrutiny and pressure to deliver on them. Tesla's efforts to clean up its supply chain were making headlines, but not always in the way Musk had hoped. The media, once quick to criticize, now lauded Tesla's progress toward more ethical sourcing. However, there were still protests in some of the mining regions where Tesla sourced lithium and cobalt, demanding more concrete action from the company to improve conditions for workers. Even with Musk's commitment to transparency and his aggressive push for reform, the backlash was far from over. Musk stood before the press once again, preparing to speak at a press conference in front of a large banner that read, "Tesla, pioneering a sustainable future." The cameras flashed, and the world's eyes were once again on him. "Tesla has committed to a new path," Musk began, his voice unwavering. "We know that our impact on the world goes beyond just making electric cars. We are reshaping entire industries, and with that power comes immense responsibility. We're taking every step to ensure that our supply chain is aligned with the values we hold dear. But let me be clear, this is just the beginning." A reporter raised her hand. "Mr. Musk, you've committed to transparency and addressing environmental and human rights issues in your supply chain, but there are still reports of exploitation. What more can you do to ensure that these workers have better conditions?" Musk paused. He knew the question was coming. The challenges were clear, and they couldn't be swept under the rug. But he wasn't about to back down. "Change is hard," Musk said with conviction. "But we are not backing down. We are going to work with organizations on the ground to ensure better conditions. We will also move toward more sustainable alternatives, and we're already developing new materials that will lessen our dependence on these resources." The room was silent for a moment, but the message was clear. Musk wasn't just promising change, he was actively working toward it. However, the reporters weren't satisfied. As the questions continued, Musk could feel the pressure building. But he was used to this. For every victory, there were doubters. For every step forward, there were critics. And in the back of his mind, Musk knew that the true test of his resolve was not just in responding to questions, but in the results that would follow. At SpaceX, the pressure was mounting as well. The vision of sending humans to Mars was as urgent as ever, but now, Musk had to balance this with his newfound commitment to sustainability. As much as he dreamed of building a self-sustaining colony on Mars, he couldn't ignore the responsibility he had to Earth. The team at SpaceX had been working on reimagining rocket technology, using renewable fuels and eco-friendly materials to reduce emissions. They had made significant progress, but space exploration was inherently energy-intensive, and developing a fully sustainable launch system was no small feat. One night, Musk sat in his office, staring at a screen filled with data and projections. His mind raced as he reviewed the latest findings from SpaceX's engineers. They had developed a prototype for a reusable rocket that ran on biofuels, a breakthrough that had the potential to drastically reduce emissions during launches. But the technology was still in its infancy, and the prototype had yet to be tested in a real-world environment. Musk rubbed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decisions pressing down on him. There were investors breathing down his neck, anxious to see the company meet its ambitious goals, and a world watching closely to see if his commitment to sustainability would be realized in a meaningful way. It was at this moment that Musk received a call that would change the course of his journey. "Elon, it's me, Gina," the voice on the other end of the line said. "I've been talking to some people about your work at Tesla and SpaceX. There's a movement happening, a real push to get all the major players in the industry to come together for a global sustainability summit. They want you to lead it." Musk's heart raced. The idea of leading a summit wasn't new, it was something he'd thought about in the past. But now, with everything that was happening, the timing couldn't have been more critical. This was an opportunity to not only lead the conversation but also to take the reins of a movement that could accelerate the world's transition to a sustainable future. "Tell me more," Musk said, suddenly energized. In the coming weeks, Musk's team worked tirelessly to prepare for the summit. Invitations were sent to the world's most influential leaders in business, government, and technology. The goal was clear: to create a unified front for the transition to a sustainable world, with a focus on renewable energy, ethical manufacturing practices, and the responsible exploration of space. As the day of the summit arrived, the atmosphere was electric. The world's media had descended on the venue, and thousands of people tuned in online to witness the event. The summit was being hailed as one of the most important gatherings in history, a chance for the global elite to come together and take meaningful action on climate change. Musk took the stage, his usual quiet intensity replaced by a sense of urgency. His speech was simple but powerful. "The challenges we face are unprecedented," Musk began, his voice steady. "Climate change, resource depletion, and inequality are just the beginning. But we have the tools to solve them. We have the technology, the expertise, and the collective will to make the future better. But we can't do it alone. We need everyone, governments, corporations, innovators, and individuals, to take responsibility for our future." The crowd was silent, hanging on his every word. "For too long, we've acted as if we could separate technological progress from the well-being of our planet. But that's no longer an option. If we're going to make the future work for everyone, we need to rethink how we build, how we consume, and how we think about our place in the universe." As Musk stepped down from the stage, he felt a weight lift off his shoulders. The summit had been a success, there was no doubt about it. But the real work had only just begun. The world was watching, and Musk knew that every decision, every move he made from this point on, would shape the future of humanity. And for the first time in a long while, he felt like he wasn't alone. The world was waking up to the urgency of the situation, and together, they could make a difference. As the summit concluded, Musk stood by a window, looking out at the horizon. He wasn't just building companies anymore. He was building a future, one where technology and sustainability went hand in hand, and where humanity's ambitions weren't limited to the stars but were grounded in the preservation of the planet that made them possible. With the success of the Global Sustainability Summit, Musk's resolve was stronger than ever. His vision for a future where technology not only advanced but also healed the planet was taking shape. But as any leader knows, the true test of a vision often comes not from external challenges but from the internal battles that arise within the ranks of those who support you. It was late one evening when Musk was notified of an internal conflict at Tesla's headquarters. One of his trusted executives, Sarah Thompson, had been accused of improperly leveraging her position to secure personal investments from suppliers, bypassing Tesla's ethical supply chain practices. The allegations were serious, and the timing couldn't have been worse. Tesla had made so much progress in its mission to create a transparent, sustainable company, and this accusation threatened to unravel everything they had worked so hard for. Musk sat in his office, his eyes scanning through the documents outlining the accusations. His mind raced, but he kept his cool. He had built Tesla on the foundation of trust in the technology, in the people, and in the vision. The thought that someone in his inner circle might have compromised that trust shook him to his core. "Is it true?" Musk asked his chief counsel, Greg Donovan, who had just entered the room. Greg nodded solemnly. "We've confirmed the evidence, Elon. There are financial transactions, emails, and witness statements pointing to a clear conflict of interest. It's bad. If we don't act quickly, this could destroy our credibility." Musk leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. He had always prided himself on his ability to make tough decisions. But this felt different. Sarah Thompson had been with Tesla since the beginning. She had been a staunch ally, someone Musk trusted deeply. The thought that she could betray that trust was difficult to reconcile. "Do we confront her directly?" Musk asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Greg nodded again. "We need to address it quickly and decisively. If it's handled poorly, the fallout will be huge." The next day, Musk and Greg sat across from Sarah in a small conference room. The tension in the air was palpable. Musk could sense Sarah's nervousness as she entered the room, but her posture remained firm, as if she expected the confrontation. "Sarah, we need to talk," Musk began, his tone steady. There are serious allegations against you. It's been brought to our attention that you've made financial arrangements with suppliers that directly conflict with Tesla's ethical supply chain practices. How do you respond?" Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. "What? That's not true," she protested, her voice trembling. "I don't know who's telling you this, but I've always followed the rules. Everything I've done has been for Tesla's success." Musk studied her closely, his gaze unwavering. "The evidence is clear. There are emails, financial records, and witnesses that say otherwise. I need you to be honest with me, Sarah. If you've made mistakes, we can work through it. But if you've betrayed Tesla's values, this conversation will take a very different turn." Sarah swallowed hard, her shoulders slumping. For a moment, it looked as though she might crumble under the pressure. But then, she took a deep breath and met Musk's eyes. "Okay," she said, her voice barely audible. "I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I was under a lot of pressure. We were struggling to keep up with the competition, and some of the suppliers were offering better terms. I thought it would be okay, just this once. But I see now that I've put everything we've built at risk." Musk sat forward, his expression softening. "Sarah, we've all faced pressure. We've all made mistakes. But if we're going to continue on this path towards sustainability, we can't afford to cut corners. The whole point of Tesla is that we do things the right way. Every time we compromise, we're telling the world that our mission doesn't matter. That's a message we can't afford to send." There was a long silence. Sarah's face was etched with guilt, but Musk could see that she was remorseful. "I know," she said, finally. "I messed up. I'm sorry." Musk leaned back in his chair, contemplating the situation. He had always believed in second chances. He understood that everyone, even those who were closest to him, could falter. But trust was everything, and rebuilding it wasn't going to be easy. "Sarah," he said after a moment, "I'm not going to fire you. But I need you to understand the gravity of this. You've violated the very principles that Tesla was built on. I need you to take full responsibility and work with the team to make things right. If you can do that, then I'll stand by you. But if you can't, then I won't be able to." Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "I will, Elon. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right." Musk stood up and extended his hand. "Good. Let's get to work then." As Sarah left the room, Musk couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. The issue had been resolved, but it had also tested his leadership in a way he hadn't anticipated. He had to make a choice, to show loyalty and faith in someone who had made a mistake, or to cut them loose in an attempt to preserve Tesla's reputation. It wasn't easy, but Musk knew that the key to Tesla's success was not just innovation, it was also the people who stood beside him. And if he wanted to build a future that aligned with his vision of sustainability, he couldn't afford to lose the people who had helped him get there. Later that day, Musk met with his team to discuss the next steps. Despite the challenges, the momentum toward a sustainable future was undeniable. Tesla was on track to unveil its new solar-powered vehicles, and SpaceX's progress toward greener rocket technology was moving ahead faster than anyone had expected. But even as the world looked to Musk as a symbol of change, he knew that the true test of his character, and his company's, would come when the stakes were highest. There would always be obstacles, always be those who sought to undermine his efforts. But as long as he stayed true to his vision, Musk knew that Tesla, SpaceX, and the future he was building could withstand any challenge. As Tesla and SpaceX continued their journey toward sustainability, Musk found himself facing a new and unexpected challenge, one that had nothing to do with technology, and everything to do with public perception. His relentless pursuit of innovation, although admired by many, had drawn criticism from a growing faction of activists who accused him of being out of touch with the common person. Despite his public commitments to change, some still viewed him as the billionaire inventor who was more concerned with conquering the stars than solving Earth's problems. The tension boiled over one crisp autumn morning when a well-organized protest against SpaceX was held just outside the company's headquarters in Hawthorne, California. The protesters, clad in green, held signs that read, "Save Earth, not Mars," and "The people over profits." Musk, ever the pragmatist, had grown accustomed to being the lightning rod for such criticisms. But this protest felt different. It wasn't the usual rhetoric. The message was clear: they didn't want Mars. They wanted tangible, immediate change here on Earth. Musk sat in his office, watching the coverage on the television. There were interviews with angry protesters outside the SpaceX building, holding up placards bearing his face crossed out in red paint. A local news anchor spoke of the increasing dissatisfaction with the tech elite, comparing Musk's ambitious Mars mission to the apathy some felt toward his efforts on climate change and global inequality. Musk ran a hand through his hair, his mind spinning with frustration. He had given everything for his companies. He had poured his heart and soul into Tesla's electric vehicles and SpaceX's green rocket technologies. He was committed to solving the world's problems, but it seemed like no matter what he did, the more he pushed forward, the more criticism he faced. That afternoon, as Musk prepared to leave the office to attend a board meeting at Tesla, he was interrupted by a familiar voice. "Hey Elon, can I talk to you for a minute?" It was Gina, his communications director, who had been with him for years. She stood in the doorway, a slight look of concern on her face. Musk nodded, gesturing for her to come in. "What's on your mind?" "I've been tracking the protesters," Gina said, pulling up a feed on her tablet. "They're gaining momentum, and it's spreading beyond just SpaceX. It's becoming a larger criticism of your entire approach to sustainability. People think you're ignoring the problems right in front of you by focusing on Mars. It's hard to dismiss this kind of backlash." Musk frowned. He had expected the criticism, but it was starting to feel more personal. More like an attack on his integrity. "Do you think they're right?" he asked, his voice betraying a hint of vulnerability. Gina paused, choosing her words carefully. "No, I don't think they're right. But the message is resonating with a lot of people, and it's something you need to address. There's a growing divide between your vision for the future and the reality people are living now. They're asking, why Mars when Earth is in crisis?" Musk leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. Gina was right. Despite his best efforts to demonstrate his commitment to both Earth and space exploration, the public was drawing lines. They wanted action here and now, not dreams of the distant future. "I need to do something drastic," Musk muttered, more to himself than to her. Gina's eyes lit up. "What do you have in mind?" The next few days were a whirlwind of meetings and brainstorming sessions. Musk knew that he had to regain control of the narrative, but he also understood that mere PR wouldn't cut it. If he truly wanted to win over the public, he needed to show them that he wasn't just another billionaire out of touch with reality. The solution came from an unlikely source. Elon Musk had always been someone who worked alone, someone who didn't rely on others for validation. But now, desperate for a fresh perspective, he reached out to someone he had once regarded as a fierce rival, Jeff Bezos. The Amazon founder had long been Musk's competitor in the space race, with Blue Origin and SpaceX constantly vying for supremacy. The two had clashed in the public eye many times, their rivalry as iconic as it was bitter. However, Musk had recently come to respect Bezos' achievements in space, and more importantly, his growing interest in environmental causes. "I know this sounds strange, Jeff," Musk began in the phone call. "But I need your help. The narrative about me is changing, and I can't do this alone anymore." There was a long pause on the other end of the line, before Bezos responded, his voice calm and measured. "I never thought I'd hear you ask for help, Elon," Bezos said with a hint of amusement. "But you're right. The stakes are high, and I don't think either of us can afford to ignore the criticism. What do you have in mind?" Musk took a deep breath, laying out his plan, the joint initiative between SpaceX and Blue Origin, focused on sustainability on Earth. The idea was simple but bold. Both companies would collaborate on a massive project that would directly benefit environmental causes, a global program aimed at creating zero-emission shipping technologies and providing solar-powered solutions to underserved communities around the world. It was a way to show that, while they were competing in space, both Musk and Bezos shared a commitment to solving the very problems they were being criticized for ignoring. "I don't know how this will go, but it's time to put our egos aside and do something that matters," Musk said, his voice resolute. Bezos didn't hesitate. "I'm in. Let's make it happen." The announcement hit the media like a lightning bolt. The two rivals, Musk and Bezos, were teaming up for a global sustainability initiative. The project was unprecedented, a joint venture between two of the world's most powerful men, focused not on their personal legacies, but on a cause that affected every human being on the planet. As the media buzzed with excitement, Musk felt a weight lift off his shoulders. This was the bold, decisive action he needed to show the world that he wasn't just focused on Mars. His vision had always been about the future, but he knew now that he needed to prove to people that the present mattered too. The world was watching. But this time, Musk wasn't alone. And with an unexpected ally by his side, he felt more confident than ever that they could tackle the challenges ahead. The announcement of Musk and Bezos' joint venture sent shockwaves across the globe. News outlets, social media platforms, and environmental groups were abuzz with the implications of two of the wealthiest men in the world putting aside their rivalry to tackle one of the most pressing issues of our time, climate change. The initiative, called Earth First, was an ambitious global program focused on sustainable shipping technologies and solar energy solutions for underserved communities. The project promised to revolutionize industries that had long been seen as contributors to environmental degradation. By teaming up, Musk and Bezos hoped to shift public perception and, more importantly, take meaningful action toward addressing climate change. As soon as the press conference concluded, Musk was flooded with messages from across the world, journalists seeking interviews, environmental activists praising the move, and even political leaders weighing in with their opinions. It was, without a doubt, one of the most pivotal moments of Musk's career. But the ripple effect of the announcement was felt in ways Musk hadn't anticipated. It started with Tesla. The company had long been recognized as a leader in the electric vehicle market, but the Earth First project shifted its focus. The new initiative had caused a flurry of activity in the electric car industry, and competitors who had once scoffed at Tesla's green mission were now scrambling to catch up. Every major automotive company now had to reckon with the fact that not only was Tesla leading the way in EV technology, but Musk's collaboration with Bezos had positioned Tesla as the symbol of sustainability in a world that was increasingly looking for ways to reduce its carbon footprint. Musk sat in a strategy meeting at Tesla's headquarters, surrounded by his top executives. There was a palpable sense of urgency in the room, with people trying to figure out how to capitalize on the newfound attention from the Earth First initiative. "What's the next step?" asked Linda Matthews, Tesla's chief marketing officer. "How do we ensure that we remain at the forefront of this shift? Now that this initiative has gone global, people are going to be expecting results. We need to act fast." Musk leaned forward, a contemplative expression on his face. "This is more than just about keeping up. This is about leading the way. We've got to accelerate our efforts, expand our solar-powered products, increase our battery production, and integrate more sustainable practices into everything we do. And we have to keep pushing the envelope with our electric vehicles. If we stop innovating, we'll lose the momentum we've gained." "We've been talking about expanding into emerging markets for a while now," Greg Donovan, Tesla's chief counsel, chimed in. "With this partnership, we've got an even greater opportunity to push Tesla into regions that are already embracing green technologies, India, Africa, and Southeast Asia." Musk nodded. "Exactly. If we can bring sustainable technology to those areas, we not only help solve a major environmental issue, but we also help lift people out of poverty." This isn't just about business, it's about creating a future where everyone has access to renewable energy. But the ripple effect of the partnership wasn't limited to Tesla. It also impacted SpaceX in ways Musk hadn't anticipated. The collaboration between Musk and Bezos had raised questions not just about space exploration but about their roles as global innovators. While their rivalry in space had captured public attention, now the world was focused on their joint efforts on Earth. Would Earth First truly make a difference? Would it succeed where so many others had failed? Suddenly, the eyes of the world were on Musk and Bezos to prove that their efforts weren't just marketing ploys, but real solutions to global problems. The scrutiny grew even more intense when Musk was invited to testify before the United Nations. The international community was eager to hear what he had to say about his collaboration with Bezos, and more importantly, how the initiative would be implemented on a global scale. As Musk sat in front of the United Nations Assembly, he realized just how high the stakes had become. This was no longer just a matter of innovation, it was about public trust. He stood before the assembly, his usual confidence giving way to a rare moment of introspection. "We're at a critical juncture in human history," Musk began, his voice calm but resolute. "We can continue to divide ourselves over differences in technology, business, or ideology, or we can come together to solve the problems that affect us all. Earth First is not just an initiative between two companies. It's a movement to demonstrate that business leaders, regardless of their competition, can unite for the greater good. If we truly want to change the world, we need to be willing to put aside our egos and focus on what really matters, the future of the planet." The room was silent. Then, a ripple of applause broke out. It was a moment that Musk would never forget, one of the rare times he felt the weight of his words resonate with the world. Back in the US, the initiative continued to make waves. Tesla's stock price surged, bolstered by the announcement of their commitment to expanding sustainable technology to emerging markets. The partnership between Musk and Bezos was seen as a bold step forward, showing that innovation could be used to address both economic and environmental challenges. But not everyone was pleased. Among the critics were some powerful industry players, traditional energy companies and certain factions within the political establishment who saw the Earth First initiative as a threat to the status quo. They had long relied on fossil fuels, and the idea that Musk and Bezos might disrupt this industry with clean energy solutions was seen as a direct challenge to their profit models. One such critic was Senator Dianne Fitzpatrick, a staunch advocate for the traditional energy sector. She had long been outspoken about her belief that renewable energy wasn't ready to take over the global market, and she was suspicious of the growing influence of Musk and Bezos. Fitzpatrick called for a Senate hearing to investigate the potential impacts of Earth First on the U.S. economy. She was quick to accuse Musk and Bezos of using their vast fortunes to push an agenda that could destabilize industries that had been the backbone of America for decades. "While the rest of us are trying to make ends meet, these billionaires are using their wealth and influence to tell us how to live," Fitzpatrick argued in a press briefing. "It's time to ask the hard questions. Who is really benefiting from these so-called sustainable technologies?" The political opposition didn't faze Musk as much as it used to. He had always expected resistance. However, the growing backlash did spark a realization within him: for Earth First to succeed, it would need to overcome not just technological and logistical hurdles but the cultural and political divisions that had long plagued efforts to address climate change. The sun was setting over the vast, sprawling complex of SpaceX's headquarters, casting long shadows over the sleek, futuristic buildings. Inside, the tension was palpable. Musk sat at his desk, reviewing the final details of the Earth First initiative. It had been months since he and Bezos first announced their partnership, and the project had gained enormous traction. But with every success came new challenges, and Musk felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. The media had been relentless in their coverage, both praising and scrutinizing their every move. While many lauded the partnership as a bold step toward solving global environmental issues, there were those who believed it was just another publicity stunt, something meant to placate the public while the world's most powerful men continued to rake in profits. Musk wasn't bothered by the doubters, but the pressure to deliver results weighed heavily on him. Time was running out. The world was watching, and the initiative's first major project, a series of solar-powered shipping vessels meant to revolutionize global trade, was set to launch in a few weeks. If they failed, it wouldn't just be a blow to their companies, it would be a setback for the entire movement they had worked so hard to build. But it wasn't just the public that Musk had to contend with. Political opponents were gaining ground, and the Senate hearings about Earth First were ramping up. Senator Dianne Fitzpatrick had called for a full investigation into the initiative, accusing Musk and Bezos of attempting to use their vast fortunes to monopolize the renewable energy industry and dismantle traditional industries. There was also the growing influence of fossil fuel lobbyists, who were doing everything in their power to derail the project. The political pressure was mounting. Just as Musk was lost in thought, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Jeff Bezos. "We need to talk. Urgent." Musk frowned. They'd been in constant communication throughout the development of Earth First, but this message felt different, more urgent. He quickly dialed Bezos, his heart racing as the phone rang. "Elon, we need to make some tough decisions," Bezos' voice crackled through the speaker. "What's going on?" Musk asked, his mind already jumping to conclusions. "The shipping vessels," Bezos replied. "We've hit a major snag. There's been an unexpected issue with the solar panels we're using. They're not efficient enough for the scale we need. We've already invested millions into this project, and if we don't fix this soon, it could delay the entire initiative, and possibly sink our credibility." Musk felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. The solar-powered vessels were the flagship project of Earth First, the one that would prove that sustainable technology could work on a massive scale. If they couldn't get it right, it would mean disaster. "We can't afford another delay. This is bigger than us now, Jeff. If we fail, all the work we've done will be for nothing," Musk said, his voice firm but filled with urgency. "I know," Bezos responded. "But here's the thing, we've been trying to develop the technology ourselves for too long. I think it's time we look outside our bubble, get a fresh perspective. We need to bring in outside expertise. I'm thinking of reaching out to a group of engineers who specialize in sustainable technology, people who've been working on next-gen solar systems. They've been under the radar, but their work is groundbreaking." Musk paused, processing the idea. It was a risk, but one that might be worth taking. "Let's do it. We don't have time to waste. Find them, and let's get them on board." In the weeks that followed, the new team of engineers quickly made an impact. Their fresh ideas and innovative designs breathed new life into the solar panels, improving their efficiency and durability. The team worked around the clock, pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Musk and Bezos were impressed by their ingenuity, and for the first time in months, Musk felt a sense of hope. The shipping vessels were finally ready for launch, and the first test run was scheduled. The anticipation was palpable, and the entire world was watching. The eyes of environmentalists, critics, and the media were all trained on SpaceX and Blue Origin, waiting to see if their bold initiative would succeed, or fall apart. The morning of the test run arrived, and Musk stood on the dock, watching the massive solar-powered vessel slowly glide into the water. His stomach was in knots, but he knew that there was no turning back now. This was the moment they had been working toward. Jeff Bezos was by his side, as always. They stood together, their eyes fixed on the vessel as it began its journey out into the ocean. "Ready?" Bezos asked, his voice steady. Musk nodded, his face serious. "Let's do this." As the vessel sailed into the open water, the crew on board ran through their checks. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, but then, just as the vessel reached its cruising speed, a sudden mechanical failure caused the ship to shudder. Musk's heart stopped. The test had barely begun, and already they were facing a crisis. "Check the system." Musk barked into his comms, watching anxiously as engineers scrambled to fix the issue. For several tense minutes, there was no response. The ship continued to drift, its solar panels flashing in the sun as if mocking them. And then, a voice came through the comms. "We've isolated the problem, Elon," one of the engineers said. "It's a minor issue with the power grid. We can reboot the system and have it up and running in about 20 minutes." Musk exhaled sharply, his hands gripping the railing. This wasn't over yet. They couldn't afford another failure. 20 minutes later, the vessel was back on track. It was a small victory, but it was enough. The test continued, and by the time the vessel returned to dock, it had completed its first successful run. The solar-powered ship had proven that it could function at scale, marking a milestone for Earth first. Musk and Bezos stood together on the dock, watching the vessel return. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The launch had been a success, and the world was about to take notice. That evening, as the news spread of the successful test run, Musk felt a wave of relief wash over him. The project wasn't just a step forward for SpaceX and Tesla, it was a triumph for sustainable energy on a global scale. But as he sat in his office, reflecting on the challenges they had faced, he knew that this was only the beginning. The political opposition would not go away. The challenges of transitioning to renewable energy would remain. But in that moment, as Musk gazed out at the stars from his office window, he realized that they had taken the first step toward a future where the planet and its people could thrive, together. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?